This is to my soulmate, the heart of my heart, Neila, and to all the mothers, to all the holy mothers who bring down their children to this world. Melech Magayon Mavai Vatke Urter Tevei Simayon Shvavala Kovademach Levei Avayon Elokon Ilei Karore Sona me poma yevo so yamape azame ni goy goro so amame divaga nikolo mayo Kovori boy no la play all mayo Ani mami, ani mami. באמונו שלמו הביאס המשיח הביאס המשיח אני מאמין באמונו שלמו באמונו שלמו הביאס המשיח הביאס המשיח ואף על פי שיצמא עם כל זה אחכה אליי ואף על פי שיצמא עם כל זה אחכה אליי תירה לה 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 תירה לה לה אני מאמין באמונו שלמו באמונו שלמו הביאס המשיח הביאס המשיח
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם.
Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. I am Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and today we have reached a great milestone. We've finished the book of Exodus, and we are going to start the book of Leviticus. And if you thought the book of Exodus was technical, at least the second half, wait till you get to the book of Leviticus. But we're going to try to make it fun, and we're going to try to make it interesting. And as I've said before, I really find these parts of the Torah to be absolutely fascinating. It's kind of like putting together the pieces of a complicated, intricate system, and seeing how all the pieces work together with some narrative mixed in as well. So we'll get to that in a little while. But let's start with a couple of words. And I guess the thought that is on my mind these days is I see, a lot of people around the world I know who are loyal to Yahweh, loyal to God, loyal to the Torah, to the people, to the God of Israel, and are really going through a very, very rough, difficult time right now, or are just good people, because honestly, just by being a good person, you are loyal to Yahweh, even though you don't know it, either, whether you know it or not. I mean, maybe you're not fully 100% loyal, but you're, in the right camp, so to speak, at the end of the day. So I do see that, or I do notice that there are a lot of people in this world right now who are just really, really, going through difficult times. It seems that the world is getting more and more bizarre. The country where I grew up, which I am not there now, and I haven't been there for a number of years. The United States, which I grew up, I was very, very patriotic, shall we say, and very pro-American. I mean, and now I just look at the country, and it's completely unrecognizable to the country it was when I grew up. It's something that it just seems like it's falling apart at the seams, just like Rome before its collapse. And I really don't see the situation there getting any better. As I've been saying for years now, I only see two possible outcomes for the United States of America. One is total descent into chaos / civil war. Maybe a situation like we have in Haiti right now. I think there was a movie that came out recently called Civil War. I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to see if it hit the pirate sites yet, because that's where I get all my movies from. But those kind of movies, they foretell something, or they portend something. If you look at the movies that came out, let's say before 9/11, you'll see there were a lot of movies that were coming out, which were like Armageddon type movies. There's somehow or another, there's kind of a collective conscience where people know what's coming, and they feel it in their bones. There must have been in that collective conscience of the United States a feeling that something big was going to happen even before 9/11 happened, on on some kind of subconscious spiritual soul level, whatever you want to call it. And so the fact that a movie like this, Civil War, again, I haven't seen it, I've only heard about it, has come out, also portends that something is brewing in the United States of America, that something big is brewing, right? People feel it on a kind of soul, on a kind of gut level, I guess you could say. And to kind of get back to what I was saying, I've been saying for years that there's only two possible ways that this whole situation in the United States has gotten itself into, and it has become, a modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, it's as decadent as any empire, and it's, in its collapse. I mean, it's just crazy. But there are only two ways that this can end. Number one is a complete descent into chaos and civil war, and perhaps just rival gangs running the place like we see in Haiti. Basically, just a complete descent into chaos. Or the other way is the appointment election of an absolute dictator, almost like an Adolf Hitler type. And I'm not talking about Donald Trump. Donald Trump, I love Donald Trump, and I voted for Donald Trump, and I will vote for Donald Trump again. I love Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is not a dictator. He really needs to be more of a dictator than he is. He's actually too nice a guy, which is sadly, I think maybe he's learned his lesson because he got smacked around so much during his first term that if he gets in the second term, which I don't think he will, sadly, then I think he will have learned his lesson of it, and he's going to be much tougher. But he is definitely not the type of dictator, the type of Hitler that I'm talking about. But I think that is the other possibility: either complete descent into chaos, or the election appointment, the rise of a very, very strong, powerful dictator over the United States of America. We saw this in Rome, right? I don't claim to be an expert on Roman history, but the end of the Roman Republic was followed by the beginning of the Roman monarchy, and it apparently what happened there was that the Republic had gotten so weak and so decadent and so corrupt that it was no longer serving the purposes of its people, and people felt they needed a strong leader, and so the Republic came to an end, and then the monarchy arose in Rome. And I could definitely see the same thing happening in the United States of America, something like it. I don't know if they'll call it a monarchy, but whatever they call it, I could definitely see it happening, because there's only so much that people can take. There's only so much chaos and decadence and instability that people can take before they say, we need this place to be run like the mafia, runs its neighborhoods, or to run neighborhoods or something like that. And that's what happened in Germany. That's what happened in Rome at the end of the Republic, and that is what has happened throughout history in many cases. So we'll see. But I wasn't originally talking here about the United States of America. I was just giving that as an example to say that inevitable result of women voting. No comments. Speak to me privately about that one. However, I will say one thing, that I did come up with a plan. I think that besides women, which there are probably women here, so I don't want to insult them, but besides women, another problem is that young people are voting. Young people are given the right to vote. Right, the voting age, I think, was originally 21, and then it was lowered to 18 after the Vietnam War, with the reasoning that if you're old enough to die as a soldier, then you're old enough to vote. That's absolutely not true. That's not true. It doesn't take a lot of wisdom to die as a soldier. It means following orders, and young people are put into the position of soldiers not because they're great wisdom, but because their bodies are very strong at that age. But they lack wisdom, they lack understanding, they lack knowledge. The Torah doesn't even recognize someone as a full-fledged adult until the age of 20. So I came up with this idea. I think it should be added as a constitutional amendment. Call your congressmen, call your senators. And the idea is you cannot vote for an office until you've reached the age that you are eligible for that office. So if I remember my United States Constitution correctly, well, let's look it up. Age, I think it's 25, 30, and 35. Age at which one can become president is 35, right? Age of candidacy. 1 second here. I gotta go through all this, blah, 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 blah. Why doesn't it just give me a list? I think it's 35. So I'm going to assume it's 35. I think for the Senate, it's 30. And I think for the House of Representatives, it is 25. I might be off. Maybe it's president is 40. Senate is 35. No, I think what I said is right. So that means you cannot vote. There should be an amendment passed to the Constitution. You're not allowed to vote in the House of Representatives elections until you've reached the age of 25. You're not allowed to vote in the elections for Senate until you've reached the age of 30, and you're not allowed to vote for president until you've reached the age of 35. And I think that would solve a lot of problems, because the Democrats, they get a lot of their votes from people who are just young and stupid and don't know anything much about the world, and just think, oh, liberalism and kumbaya, and that makes a lot of sense, and it all seems great. So I think that would solve a lot of problems. Of course, the Democrats would never allow that, because their fuel, the fuel by which they fuel their power, is our people, our young people, women, disenfranchised. I won't even use that word. Let's say dissatisfied minorities, or minorities who wish to take over the United States of America and rise to power, basically. So until that problem is solved, and there is a demographic problem, and as popular as Donald Trump is, he's going to be outswamped by all the various types of people that the Democrats have over the years, attracted to their party, who either hate the United States of America, hate the white European culture that the United States of America originally represented, and to change it permanently, or actually just to destroy it and take over for themselves, or young people who are so dumb and stupid, that they think that liberalism is a really nifty idea. It just seems cool, but they don't have the wisdom in life to understand where it leads. Women who look at President Obama's ass and say, "Wow, that guy has a nice ass. I think I'll vote for him." Sorry, women, but I actually had a number of women tell me that very thing, and stuff like that. So, at any rate, that's neither here nor there. I'm outside of the United States of America. I have been outside of the United States of America for a bunch of years now, and it's at the end of the day, even though I grew up there, I do not consider it really my country. My country is Israel. My people are Israel, and that's the only thing at the end of the day that I'm loyal to. So I look at it as an outside observer. I guess I do have some nostalgia towards it because I grew up there, and I was a very patriotic American growing up. But I don't really. I just look at it as another country in history that is going to have to meet its own fate. It's either going to have to change its ways, or just fall by the wayside, as so many other countries have done. At any rate, I think I was originally speaking about those who are good people, those who are loyal to Yahweh, going through very difficult times right now. And I see that I have a number of friends who are just going through difficult times, and it just seems like the world is so upside down, so topsy turvy, wherever you are, that it just sometimes there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's now a common phenomenon that we see among many people who are loyal to God, who are loyal to Yahweh. And I guess my message for the day is that there eventually time will get better. That these are times that are trying times. These are testing times. They're testing us. They're trying to the God is using these times to see who really is loyal to Him, who will really stick to Him no matter how tough the times get. And at the end of all this, I think there will be much better times, and we just have to kind of stick to our guns, stick to our belief systems, cling to Yahweh, our God, and just hope and pray and wait for times to get better, because I think we all feel that something is to a head. I don't know when, I don't know how exactly, but something is definitely coming to a head. Whether it's going to be in our lifetimes or not, who knows? But as rough as it are, it is our responsibility to ourselves, to our families, to God, to just to stay loyal to Him, and to stay the course, and to put up with the difficult times. I always used to give the analogy of a martial arts instructor. Okay, if you just dabble in martial arts, then you get, let's say, your white belt or whatever. You're going to get knocked around a little bit. You're going to learn this that exercise. Maybe you're going to run around the gym a couple of times. And the instructor's maybe going to be a bit tough on you. But let's say you're going for a black belt, right? Then you are going to get your ass kicked left and right. You're going to be destroyed trying to get that black belt, right? You're going to be really put through the ringer, and it's going to go on for a long, long time. But at the end, you'll end up with your black belt. So when we see that we're going through very difficult times, I think a positive way to think about it is to think of us going for our black belts in life, going for our black belts, and the very reason for our existence on this planet, which is to emulate Yahweh, to get close to Yahweh, to do what is right, and to distance ourselves from what is wrong. So that's not an easy process. Life is not meant to be easy. Life is not meant to be, just a trip to the amusement park. It's meant to be difficult and challenging and tragic at times, and it is meant to really turn us into much better individuals, so that when we do eventually have some kind of eternal life, whatever that is, or when the time comes to choose who Yahweh, or when Yahweh, the time comes for Yahweh to choose who He wants with Him forever and ever, and who He doesn't, then then uh, then by getting the black belts in life, then hopefully He's going to choose us. So that's the way I always try to look at all of the hardships and the difficulties in life. That it's training to be a black belt in life, and even though that doesn't always make it easier, it does at least give it a reason. It does at least put some reason behind it, and I think people can kind of go through anything when they know that there's a reason that they're going through it. And when someone doesn't feel that there's a reason that they're going through something, then they can't even go through even the most, even the slightest difficulties or the slightest bumps in the road. So if we keep in mind that everything we're going through is to make us better people, is to turn us into black belts. That's why we're getting our butts kicked around so much. It's because Yahweh loves us and He wants to train us to be black belts in life, black belts in being close to Him, and so He beats us around a lot to, as I think Phil said up above, to separate the wheat from the chaff, or to turn us from chaff into wheat, or to purify us like fine gold in the smelting pot, is an analogy that's often used in the Tanakh, and hopefully we will see one day that this was all for a reason. We're only in this life temporarily anyway, so if it's like going to the dojo, if you're only there 3 times a week, then the sensei knows that those 3 times a week he's really got to kick your butt if he wants to turn you into good black belt. Well, that's like life. Our time in this world is limited. We're only here for 70 or 80 or 90 years. God has a limited amount of time, and so if He really wants to turn us into black belts in life, then he's got to kick our butts in the times that we are in the limited time that we are in His dojo, known as planet Earth, before we disappear from here and go back off into wherever it is we came from and wherever it is we go. Any chance did the sons of Moshe enter the promised land? I don't think the sons of Moshe are ever mentioned again. They're 2 sons of Moshe, and I can't think of any time that they're ever mentioned again. I could be wrong, but they are famously kind of like become irrelevant, like the sons of Aharon, right? So Phil is quoting here Zechariah 39, and I will put the spirit into the fire, refine them as we refine silver, and test them as gold is tested. They will call on my name, and I will answer them. I will say they are my people, and they will say them, yeah, they're God. Exactly. Perfect quote, Phil. That really kind of sums it up. So, and Suriel says, we are being furnace in the fire to make us stronger and get rid of impurity. Exactly. Exactly. So hang in there. Times are weird. Times are tough for me as well. I don't get into my personal life, but life is not exactly easy all the time. And so just, we have to believe there's all a reason for it, that all of us who are loyal to Yahweh, who stick to Yahweh, who cling to Yahweh, then we will be given life. We'll be given eternal life, and we will be given closeness to Him, which is the ultimate reward for us as sons, to be eternally connected to our Father. And we certainly would not want the alternative where Yahweh says, okay, this experiment, John Smith, soul number 3,928,000, whatever. This was a mistake. I gave him a chance and he messed it up. So I'm going to erase that. I'm just going to turn that soul off. Goodbye, the end, right? So anything we have to go through in this world, any suffering we have to go through in this world, is worth it if we know that it's for a reason, and we know that in the end it will lead to our eternal existence in the presence of Yahweh. Okay, so those are my thoughts for the day. Those are my thoughts for the day. So with that being said, we will begin the book of Leviticus. And just give me a second here and let me bring it up. Let's see here. Torah. Leviticus. Leviticus 1. Bring it over to the Hebrew. Share the screen. Oops. I mean, I actually truly, and I'm not just saying this, I truly, truly thank Yahweh for all of the difficulties and hardships he's put me through in my life, because without them, I could not have developed my character. I could not have become a better person. That's without a doubt the truth. If some of the things I've had to go through in life I didn't go through, then I never would have developed as a human being. And developing as a human being, becoming a better person, a more self-aware person, a person closer to Yahweh, a person who is more aware of of what's good and what's evil, a person who is more aware of what has eternal value and what has temporary value. So an example of something that has eternal value would be the love that one has for their child or their parent or even their dog or their cat. That is something that has eternal value, that lasts beyond the illusion, the temporary illusion of this world of space and time that we're in. And things that don't have eternal value are stupid things like money. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against money. I Money is very useful. It's to have money, and I appreciate beautifully crafted things, whether it's a beautiful car, a beautiful building, a beautiful dinner in a nice restaurant. These are all things I appreciate. But what do you do to get that money? Do you screw everyone else over in order to get the money? Is your total focus just on money, 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 nothing else? Then that is a value which is not eternal. That's a value that is going to that is something that's just going to disappear when you fly away from this temporary uh, existence on the earth, within the realm of space and time. So I think perhaps our main goal in this life, and it's very difficult, is to learn to separate from that which is real and that which is fake, from that which is eternal and that which has only temporary value in this temporary existence that we have in this world of space and time. And analogy I like to give is Disneyland. Okay, so, or Disney World, let's say. Okay, so I haven't been to Disney World. I went to Disney World once with a camp group when I was like 16 years old, but I haven't been to Disney World in years. So I might be making all of this up, what actually goes on there, but it doesn't matter for the analogy. So let's say, living in this world and getting caught in the things that are only important in this world, it's kind of like going to Disney. It's kind of like going to Disney World, and when you go through the entrance, you take, I don't know, let's say you take all of your money that you have saved up, or a chunk of your money that you have saved up, and you exchange it for Disney dollars. Again, I have no idea whether there are actually something called Disney dollars in Disney World, but let's pretend and say there are. So you take, I don't know, $10,000 and you exchange it for Disney dollars. Okay. And so your real dollars, they have value outside of Disney World, but your Disney dollars, they only have value within Disney World. You can buy popcorn with them. You can get, you can skip the line for whatever ride, you can see a show or stuff like that. And so you go into Disney World, okay, and let's say you're a little kid, so you don't have a lot of, perspective on the world yet. And you go there and you have 10,000 Disney dollars. What are you going to do? You're going to get caught in this world, and you're going to very quickly forget. Let's say you're on a 2-week vacation. You're going to quickly forget about the outside world. You're going to think Disney World is everything, and your Disney dollars are worth everything because they are now your world, and you've forgotten about the outside world, even though they have no value once you get out of Disney World. So maybe you spend, who knows, maybe you're gonna see Disney dollars on the floor, and you're going to pick them up, even though, let's say, dropped out of someone's pocket. You're going to say, wow, I want more popcorn. I want more rides. So these Disney dollars dropped out of someone's pocket. I'm not going to return it to them. I'll just keep the Disney dollars for myself. Maybe you're going to, if you're really get involved in Disney World and you really get addicted to Disney World, who knows, maybe you're going to go around and, rob other kids of their Disney dollars. So you have more Disney dollars. So you can buy more popcorn and more rides and all of this kind of stuff. And at the end, let's say you spent all 10,000 of your Disney dollars plus whatever other Disney dollars you found and stolen while you're in Disney World. And now the 2 weeks are up, and your parents say, "Okay, that's it. Time to leave Disney World and go back to the real world." Okay, except what's the problem? You now have all these you have all these Disney dollars that you've spent all of your time, in Disney World, thinking only about Disney World as if you're going to be there forever. You have all these Disney dollars, and now you have to leave them behind. Let's pretend you can't exchange them back because, Disney being the evil corporation it is, you can buy Disney dollars, but you can't exchange them back for real dollars. So now you're stuck with all these Disney dollars, and your parents say, "Okay, time to go back to, whatever, place you came from. I don't know, some, let's say a real shithole like New York City, and where I grew up. And, that's it. Time to leave Disney World and go back to the real world. And now you have to leave all of your Disney dollars behind. Disney World was just a dream. It was never reality to begin with. It was just a very temporary existence. And now you're back in the real world, and you're impoverished. All your, again, I don't know how many kids who have $10,000, but just go with me on this one, right? Now you're back in the real world. You've spent your 10,000 real dollars. You have absolutely nothing left back in the real world. You've blown it all on Disney World. You've and you didn't spend any of those 2 weeks. Let's say you could have, during those 2 weeks, you could have left Disney World for a couple of hours each day, and I don't know, earn some real money working at Burger King or something like that. You can use in the outside world. And you didn't do that. You just got so caught up in Disney World. You spent all your Disney dollars. Now you're completely broke, and you go back to the real world, and now you're screwed, basically. Okay. Well, that's an analogy for this world that we're in right now. We come into this world, and we think we're going to be here forever, especially when we're young, because we don't see the end of the journey. We're so close to the beginning of the journey, and so far from the end of the journey. Of course, we all know it can end at any time, right? You can get run over by a bus. You can die in a war. You can get in a car accident, God forbid. All of these things, just like I guess with the Disney analogy, your parents could say, "Oh, and we just found out there's a hurricane coming. We have to leave Disney World early and go back home." So, but you think that you're going to be in this world forever, and so you start focusing only on this world, and you forget about the things that are real in the real world. Okay, because this is not. I don't want to become like nihilistic or anything. This world is the real world, because in it we can build ourselves up for the eternal world, right? But it's not the real world in the sense that this is all kind of an illusion. This is all kind of a giant world, all kind of a giant game that we're playing, which is really designed to see how we're going to deal with it, and to test us, to see whether we're going to focus on just our Disney dollars in this world for 70, 80, 90 years, or we're going to focus on things which actually have value, eternal value, outside this temporary world of space and time. So that's the way, that's the setup. That's really the setup. That's the world we're in. And we go in here, we think, because it's such a long time we're here, it seems like such a long time, especially when we're 10, 20, 30 years old. We forget that there's an end to it, that it's all going to come to an end one day. And all of the useless things that we did while we were in this world are going to have zero value outside this world. And as I always say, I always just say to a good friend of mine, we're in this world for 70 years, and I used to say we're alive for 70 years, and we're dead for eternity. So when you compare 70 years or 80 years or 90 years to eternity, right? It's like comparing the number 70 to the number infinity. So ultimately, the only thing that's important are those things that we can take with us that have value outside of this temporary illusion, this temporary world that we're in, within the illusion of space and time. And therefore, it's really difficult, but that is what Yahweh wants us to distinguish. He wants us to distinguish between that which is temporary and fake and doesn't have lasting value, and that which is eternal and real and has lasting value outside of this world in space-time, this temporary world in which we're in. And what are those things? Those things are defined by the word good. Those things which are good are the things which have eternal value. And it could be things, again, like the relationships that we develop in this world with our children, our parents, our friends, whoever, right? That's something that's real. Okay. The good that we do for other people, that's something that's real. That's something that's eternal. Okay. And the fake things are money, power, honor, control over others, all of the junk that we see all around us in this world, which people get so caught up in. And if we think about the difference between good people and bad people, we will always see that the good people, their focus is really on these eternal things, these eternal values, and the bad people, their focus is on the non-eternal values, right? The temporary values. So let's take a person like, Donald Trump, who's a good person, right? Who has a lot of these has a lot of these Disney dollars, so to speak, right? But we see that he's a good person. He really cares about his country. He cares about his family. He cares about people. He sacrificed a lot because he wants to make his country a better country. He wants to do good for other people. He wants to do what's right and not what's wrong. And then contrast that with, I don't know, let's say a Hillary Clinton, who you could just tell that woman doesn't give a crap about anyone but herself and her own money and her own power and and her own self-aggrandizement. So that is the difference between someone who, on the one hand, again using the example of Donald Trump, who is doing something with eternal value, and a Hillary Clinton who's doing something with just temporary value, which has no real existence outside of this temporary Disney world that we're in for 70 or 80 or 90 years. Okay, enough. Melech, what is eternity? As in, what is eternal life? Where and when? Don't ask me. I have no idea. And anyone who tells you that they have any idea is lying. Okay, we are not supposed to know. We don't know. We can get little glimpses of it. We can get little feelings of what it might be, but we don't know. And one of the things that really, really, really pisses me off is that you have gurus, including many rabbis. I don't know about many rabbis, but rabbis going back for centuries and millennia, who will try to explain to you exactly what happens when you die, where you go, what happens. And we really don't know. We really don't know. And I can prove that we don't know, because the wisest man in the world didn't know. And that's Ecclesiastes, right? Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon. And if we go to Ecclesiastes for a second, let me find it. And I have to remember where it is. Oh boy, I'm not going to remember chapter and verse. So who knows? Let me just see if I can find it here. I'll have to Google it. Who knows? Ecclesiastes. There we go. So it's Ecclesiastes 3:21. Okay. All right. So here we go. So let's read that. Let me do the NIV translation. So it's Ecclesiastes 3. By the way, Ecclesiastes, I mean, I love all the books of the Tanakh. I think Ecclesiastes, if I had to pick a favorite, which I really can't, but if I really had to, if there was a gun to my head, I think Ecclesiastes is my favorite book of the Tanakh. It is just, it's brilliant. It's just beyond brilliant. I consider it to be the greatest work of philosophy in the history of humanity. Okay, so Ecclesiastes 3. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. You've all heard that one. But let's go down to here. So I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see. And I'm just going to read the English. It's probably not a great translation, but I'll just, to make it go quickly here, I'll just read the English. They may see that they are like the animals. Surely the fate of humans is that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. And what what King Solomon is speaking about here is death, right? We die, as he says right here. As one dies, so dies the other. Okay, so he's asking us philosophical question. Okay, and I'll explain in a second why he's asking this philosophical question. But let's go ahead and read a little bit. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from the dust, and all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises up and if the spirit of the animal goes down to the earth? So he is basically, King Solomon is saying, or is lamenting the fact that everything is meaningless because we don't even really know if there's life after death, if we really live for eternity. King Solomon is in these verses is expressing that doubt that we all have and we are supposed to have as human beings and we must have as human beings, that we really don't know what happens to us when we die. We believe on some deep level, yes, there's an eternal world that we continue, just drink some water, that we continue in some sense for eternity if we're good, unless God decides to flip our light switch off. But he's expressing in this verse that he doesn't really know. Okay, so King Solomon, the wisest person in the history of the world, doesn't really know if we live after we die. Then nobody does. Okay, and all of these rabbis and other gurus who come along and say, "Oh, I know exactly what happens. This happens, and then that happens, and then life is, life after death is, you're flying around with wings on and among clouds or whatever, right?" They don't know. Even King Solomon here is expressing his doubt and expressing his fear. And this doubt and this fear, he's expressing the fact that leads to a sense of despair. He's expressing his doubt, his fear, which leads to, or his doubt, which is fear, his fear, which leads to his despair. So King Solomon is being human here. He's being real about it. He's not saying, "Oh, I'm the smartest person that ever lived in the history of humanity. I know for a fact that there's life after death. I know what happens after death." No, he is so smart that he knows he doesn't know. It's the kind of less smart ones who think they have it all figured out, just enough to be dangerous, so to speak. Okay, and this is such a human reaction and such a true reaction. What King Solomon is expressing here, that I think it's a model for all of us. It is important to know that we really don't know what happens to us after we die. Nobody does. And we really don't even know if we live for eternity after we die. Why are we so upset when a close relative dies, a parent dies, or any close relative, right? Because yes, we believe on some level and we hope and we kind of have a faith that there is life after death and we're going to see them again, but we don't really know. We don't know 100%, and we're not supposed to know in this world. So maybe that's the last time we're ever going to see them, and that's why we're so sad. I think that's one of the reasons we're so sad when someone who's very close to us dies, because maybe that's the last time we're ever going to see them. Okay, one of the reasons. So I have a quip that I've been saying for probably for decades now, which is this. Okay, this is my Proverbs, Mishlei Melech, the Proverbs of Melech ben Yaakov. And one of the proverbs that I've been saying, or one of the quips that I've been saying for years, okay, is if you don't doubt the existence of God at least once a day, then you don't really believe in God. And if you don't hate God at least once a day, then you don't really love God. Okay, think about it. Okay, I think it relates to what King Solomon is saying here. He's expressing his limits as a human being, that he can't really know what happens to us outside of this world of space and time. We are put in this illusion. We're put in this video game. Sometimes I like to compare this world to a video game. Okay, we're put in this video game for 70 or 80 or 90 years, and all we see is the video game. It's like back in the 80s when I was a kid, and we used to go to the arcades and we'd sit there, playing Miss Pac-Man for hours on end. And my best friend growing up, Drew, he came up with a way. He's a very, very brilliant kind of kid. And he came up with a way that we could play for hours for free. Yes, I shouldn't admit this, but he was. We did all kinds of little things like this growing up in the suburbs of New York. He would take a quarter and tape a string to it, and he was able to lower the string down into the video game machines just to the point where it it like ticks another credit in the game. You'd just go and you'd like rack up like 50 or 60 credits, and we would just sit there for like all afternoon just playing video games. Okay, so that's what this world is. Okay, it's a giant video game for 70 or 80 and 90 years, and we really can't see, just like the kids sitting there playing today. They're gamers, and they sit on their gaming chairs, and they can play sometimes for 20 hours a day, and they forget that there's something outside of the world, right? When we're in this world, we don't really know what goes on outside of this world, and we can't. And that's why King Solomon was such a brilliant person. I'll say, because in a sense, his spirit lives on to this day, right? That's why King Solomon is such a brilliant person, because so wise and so humble that he understands his own limitations of what he can know and what he can't know. And that's why I think ultimately that Ecclesiastes is the most brilliant work of philosophy in the history of humanity, because the very wise King Solomon understands his position as a human being. He understands very well his limits. He sees the world around him, and he sees that no matter what he does, try to make himself feel better, basically to not be depressed. That's really what he's talking about, is throughout or at least throughout part of Ecclesiastes, right? He makes gardens, and he acquires singers and women and all these things that he's hoping are going to get him out of this despair, this existential despair, this existential angst, this not, this feeling that we all have as human beings of what are we doing here, and where is this all leading, and something is missing, and that feeling that we all have. He realized that no matter what he tries to get rid of this depression that kind of is the undercurrent of our existence on this earth. And yes, it applies to everyone. I don't care how much you run around and pretend to be the happiest person in the world. We all have this undercurrent of doubt and depression and despair, because that is part and parcel of our existence in this world of space and time. And he expresses that perfectly. That he never avoids it. He never tries to run from it. He never tries to deny it. He never tries to pretend that he doesn't have it, like saying, "Oh, I'm so wise. I figured out, the key to happiness." No, he is so honest about it that that's really the only way to understand what he's saying in Ecclesiastes. That no matter what he does, he realizes all these things in this earth, which nonetheless he cannot get rid of this underlying feeling of fear and despair. He can suppress it, but he can't completely get rid of it. And he looks around the earth, and whatever he does, he can't get rid of it. He sees all the injustice in the earth, and that makes him even have more despair. And he really expresses it in a very beautiful way. And it's not a depressing book. A lot of people mistake Ecclesiastes as a very down, depressing book, but it's not, because at the end of the day, he comes to some beautiful conclusions, which are like, this is, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I will find it in a second, the verse I'm thinking of in my mind. But he comes to this conclusion that yes, there's doubt, there's fear, there's depression, there's despair. We can't get rid of it, but you know what? Nonetheless, we still have to find that which is good in life, right? Eat and drink, enjoy that which God has given us, enjoy the fruits of our labor, and stay close to God. And that is, as the last verse in Ecclesiastes says, that's all that is important for the human being. Or that is the entirety of man, right? So he sets up such a beautiful philosophical system whereby, unlike some philosophers, he doesn't deny the despair, the doubt, the fear that underlies every one of our days on this existence in the earth within space and time. He addresses it head on. Okay, he speaks about how he tries to get rid of it and can't. And at the end of the day, he says, yes, I have to embrace it. I know I won't be able to get rid of it. And once he embraces it and realizes he can't get rid of it, that's in a sense when he finds his happiness, which is he gives up on trying to get rid of it, realizes that's part of existence for all human beings, and then tries to enjoy the simple little things in life. And that is, in my opinion, that is a height of wisdom, when one can get to that point. And that's exactly what the book of Ecclesiastes speaks about and gets to. Okay. So, like eternity is not a good thing to put hope in. I wouldn't say that. I think that we can put hope in it. I, at the end of the day, do believe very strongly that there has to be something outside of this world of space and time, that there is an eternal place that we all go to, or that hopefully we go to. My fear, I know, in life is not that it doesn't exist, although of course I have my doubts, because who knows, right? My fear is that I'm not going to get there. I'm not going to be a good enough person. I don't know what God's cutoff point is. Is he looking only for, like, A plus plus students of life? Is he okay with A plus, A, B minus? Maybe if he lets the B minuses in, that's where I feel like I can maybe squeeze in there somehow or another. But that's honestly my fear in life is, am I doing the right things to be able to get close to God, and be a good person? That's honestly what I'm obsessed with every single day. And and quite frankly, personally speaking, that really causes me every day to question my actions, to sometimes doubt my actions, to feel guilty for, let's say, some of the things I maybe have done in the past or I'm doing now, and maybe honestly too much. But that is the thing that personally obsesses me. Not whether some kind of eternal existence with God is. I have no idea what it is and what it's like, but I believe for various reasons it is there. But will he let me in? Or is he going to say, "Listen, this one's another. I gave him a shot, and this is just another one of the failures, and I don't know. Maybe we have to recycle him, put him back, and give him another chance." Although the Tanakh never mentions anything about reincarnation, or he needs more pain and suffering till we get to the point where I can let him in, which is, I'm okay with that as long as I know there's a reason for it, and I don't know. See where else. Anyway, that's that. Okay, so but the Torah, if you notice, does not really focus on eternity and on life after death. The Torah really just focuses on just being a good person, and that's kind of what Kehelet, that's kind of what Solomon comes to at the end of as kind of his conclusion throughout Ecclesiastes, is which we should. It's You can think about all of these eternal things to a certain degree, but at the end of the day, we don't know what happens to us when we die, as the verses we saw here in Ecclesiastes 3, right, 18 through 21. So at the end of the day, it's just going in circles. It's mental. I won't say the word, but you know the phrase, right? To just sit and think about it all day long, and really, we need to just focus on being good and doing what we can to be good in this life, and whatever else is going to happen will take care of itself. It reminds me also of a line from a Woody Allen movie, and yes, I love Woody Allen's movies, most of them. And I think is it Hannah and her sisters? I think it's Hannah and her sisters, and Woody Allen. I might be misquoting this. Woody Allen is feeling very depressed. He's upset about life. He thinks what's the point of life? Expressing kind of what Solomon does in Ecclesiastes. What's the point of life? We're all going to die in the end. And so he goes to his father, again, completely mangling this. And he goes to his father, who's like 90 years old or something like that. And he says, Dad, how do you stay so happy? Aren't you worried? You're old. Aren't you worried you're die? And then his father says something like, well, I'm alive now. When I'm dead, I'll be dead. That's just the way it is. I don't think about it much. And that also is a very high level of wisdom, to realize that, yes, we could sit around and contemplate our navels to a certain degree throughout each day, throughout our lives. But at the end of the day, we're never going to figure out the answers, as Ecclesiastes says, as Woody Allen's father in the movie says. So at a certain point, we just have to put all that aside and just say, listen, I just got to live my life now, and the only thing I can do now is be the best person I could be, and whatever happens, happens. And I think really that's the answer. That's really what we have to do at the end of the day. Okay. So that all being said, let's go into Leviticus. And I really highly recommend reading, if you haven't read Ecclesiastes in a while, it's such a misunderstood book. So unfortunately, so many people think it's depressing, or that Solomon is a nihilist, or he's full of despair. It's not true. It really is an uplifting book, but you just have to go through the many layers of his. He sets up a whole system, and you have to go through the many layers of the system he sets up to realize what an uplifting book it is at the end of the day. Right? It basically says we can't know the answers to everything, so just let's enjoy it. Let's just enjoy our lives and be good people, and whatever will be will be. That's really, in a nutshell, kind of what Ecclesiastes is saying. But read it if you haven't read it in a while, and if you don't have time to read it, I always point out you can go to YouTube, and every single book of the Tanakh you can get in video format on YouTube for free. And the way you would do that is, let's say you want to listen to, I listen to the NIV. I don't know if there are any other versions out there, but let's say I'm driving in the car and I want to listen to Ecclesiastes. I would just go to YouTube, type in NIV, Ecclesiastes, boom. Actually, I can do it in YouTube, right? Let me bring up YouTube. Close this off. Oops. So search NIV. And it should pick it up right there. There's NIV Ecclesiastes. Okay. And there you have, I like this one here because it's dramatized, right? So this one is like just some guy reading it, I think. This one, when you see this kind of logo here, right? The dramatized one, then it's done like with professional voice acting, and it's much better. And every single book of the Tanakh exists in online in this form. Okay, so you can listen to any book that you want to in the Tanakh. Okay, so all that being said, let's go on to Leviticus. We are right at the beginning of the book of Leviticus. And just before we do, so just a little bit of scheduling announcements. So Purim. So I've generally been keeping Purim because Purim is supposed to be in the 14th and 15th day of the 12th month, and we're now in the 13th month. The rabbis, if it's an intercalated year, in other words, if it's a leap year, if a 13th month is added, then they keep it in the 13th month. Okay, so I didn't have time during the 12th month to do a Purim study, but I decided that what I'm going to do is I'll do it on Rabbinical Shushan Purim. To make a long story short, the 15th day, it's the day that the rabbis consider to be the 15th day of 13th month, and that's on Monday. So I'll send out an announcement about that. But we're going to do a Purim study. Basically, we're going to go through the book of Esther, and in a way that I've been doing it for years, backwards. And so I'll send out an announcement about that. That should be on Monday. I think it's going to be early in the morning, or maybe late morning Israel time. So for those of you who are in the United States, it might be too early. But I'll send out an announcement about that. And if you can't make it, then you can always catch it on YouTube afterwards. Okay. All right. So that being said, we're in Leviticus chapter 1. And I will, well, I'll get to that when I get to that. So, all right. So let's dig in. Leviticus chapter 1. And by the way, thanks for all of the well wishers over the weeks who were who wished me well. As you know, for like 2 months I had a horrible cold and cough. I mean, it was really bad, unpleasant, and I know some people even worried maybe it's something more serious than just a cold or a cough. But it's gone. It's basically completely 100% gone. But I really thank all of you who sent me wishes, wishing me well, and were concerned and all this kind of stuff. I really appreciate that. Okay, so Leviticus chapter 1. Oh, yes, and one more administrative note. Please, again, like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because that is the way the YouTube algorithm works, is the more that people like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, the more that YouTube suggests these videos to other people, from what I understand. That's what I've heard from other channels when they say like, share, and subscribe. So I'm just parroting that. But I really I feel like the time is really ripe for charism, for the brand of charism, at least that we try to do here, to take off. There's been a definite uptick since October 7th in people who've contacted me privately, either by email or WhatsApp, who are interested in charism. So I really feel like this return to true Tanakh, not only by me, but there are other people out there also. I certainly don't claim to be the only one, but for all of us who are doing this, who attempt to bring Israel and the world back to Yahweh and to true Tanakh, I really feel like this is the time is ripe. It's been since October 7th. So please share the message, and let's try to really increase the number of people who come to the study. Okay, so we are in Leviticus chapter 1. And I think that's too big. I think I put it on size. Okay, I'm going to read through. And we have 5 chapters to cover. It's a lot. We're not going to get to the end. I doubt we will at any rate, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so follow along in your favorite translation. If you can read in the original Hebrew, that's excellent. Another option is, if you're semi-fluent in Hebrew, or even if you can read the Hebrew letters, then is to have a parallel edition of the Torah in front of you. Have one side English, one side Hebrew, or Hebrew next to English. If not, then just use an English edition to follow along. Or if you have another favorite language, such as, let's say, just pick a random language, Serbian, then you can follow along in that language. And but I'm going to read in Hebrew, and I'll try to do minimal translation, but you guys know that I'm never able to really stick to that. But I do want to try to get through all 5 chapters. So I'll try to do minimal commentary and translation. I'll do translation, but I'll try to do minimal commentary, but I'm never able to stick to this. But we'll try. Okay, so here we are. We're in Leviticus chapter 1, the beginning of the 3rd book. And here we go. Verse 1, Vayikra el Moshe, Vaydaber Yahweh elao me'ohel mo'eh lemor. So he cried out, Yahweh called out to Moses, and he spoke to him from the Ohel Moed and said, so this is very important because this links us back, okay? This links us back to the end of Exodus. What happened in the end of Exodus? Let me remind you from last week. Okay, we had the completion of the tabernacle, okay, in Exodus chapter 40. And then in the last couple of verses, and we spent a while on this last week, it's so important, we have the glory of Yahweh descending into the Ohel Moed. In basically, the house, Yahweh's house is ready, and now he moves in. Okay, he's commissioned this house, or this tent, to be prepared for him in the way that he wants it, right? It's like if you're buying a house, you get to tell the architect how you want the house. So that's what he's been doing throughout the second half of Exodus. He's been telling the architects exactly how he wants his house to be set up. I mean, he's the king after all, so if he wants it that way, then that's the way it's got to be. And now the house is set up. It's all ready for him to move in. And this is moving day right here. Okay. And we actually have a day for moving day. Here it is. B'yom Rishon, b'yom HaChodesh HaRishon, b'chad l'chodesh. On the first day of the first month of the second year. Okay. What is the first day of the first month? The first month is the month of the Aviv. It's the month in which we have the Passover offering, the holiday. I'll just say the Passover holiday, right? On the 15th of the first month for 7 days when we eat matzot. So the first day of that month, of the first month of the second year, this is moving day for God. God moves in to live among the Israelites, to have his glory, his kavod, and we spoke about this also last week, live among the Israelites. So this is moving day. So that's it. Now he's moved in on the first day of the first month of the second year, the first month being the month of the Aviv. The month that we are going to be in, it's now just about full moon. So in another 2 weeks, definitely by then they will have found enough Aviv. So in another 2 weeks will be the anniversary of that first day of that first month on the next new moon. Okay. So he's there. So now it says, before he wasn't there, but now it says he called out to Moses and spoke to him from the Ohel Moed, from the tent of meeting. The tent of meeting is that tent, right, is the what we call the tabernacle. In fact, the word tabernacle comes from the word taberna. It's the diminutive of the word taberna or taverna. Okay, tabernacle means a little taverna, and the word taverna we get the English word tavern from, and the Latin word taverna means a tent. Okay, so it's the same thing. So when we say tabernacle, we mean the little tent, and that's exactly what it is—the tent of meeting, that tent that was built as a centerpiece of the entire, the entire area, right? Tent of meeting. So now, where is Yahweh calling out to Moses from? Well, he's already moved into his house. He's in the tent of meeting, and it says here explicitly, and I believe this is said explicitly to point out the fact that now this is where Yahweh is living. This is where God is living, quote unquote living, right? It's his glory, it's his kavod that's living there. We spoke about what that meant, what that means last week, and I won't go back into it again. But he's now calling out to Moses from the tent of meeting, pointing out that he's moved in. He's living among the Israelites in the desert in the tent of meeting. Okay, verse 2. Alrighty. Verse 2, Daber el bnei Israel, ואמרת אליהם, אדם כי יקריב מכם קורבן ליהוה, מן הבהמה, מן הצאן תקריבו את קורבנכם. Okay, so now we're getting the list of animals that you can bring, or the list, I should say, behema. Behema basically means mammals, domesticated mammals. So what domesticated mammals can you bring as a korban? What is a korban? They usually translate it as a sacrifice or an offering. Here they translate it as an offering. It really comes from the underlying root here. And remember, all Hebrew words have underlying roots, usually 3-letter roots. Sometimes, if they're very common, they're 2-letter roots. Sometimes they're 4-letter roots, but those are usually 2-letter roots doubled. But generally, every Hebrew word has a 3-letter root. And the 3-letter root here is kuf resh bet, and that root means to come close. Like in the Hebrew word for close is karov, even in modern Hebrew. If you want to say, I live, I don't know, close to the train station, ani gar karov letachanat harakeret. I live close, karov. Okay, so it really, a korban is a bringing the animal close to Yahweh, and that's why they call it an offering. It's being brought and offered, it's being brought to the tabernacle and offered, or outside the tabernacle and offered there. Okay, but the Hebrew word is korban. Okay, so now we're being told the types of animals you could bring as a korban, as an offering. Okay, and we're only given 2 types. It's bakar and on. Let's open up our. Let me just grab it here. Our spreadsheet we so often use. Give me a second here. And by the way, if anyone would like access to this spreadsheet as a viewer, let me know, and I'll be happy to. I'll be happy to give it to you. There's a bunch of information here, and you're more than welcome to have access to it. So just let me grab it. There it is. There we go. There we go. Okay, so we want to go to our animal terms. So why did I start this particular spreadsheet of animal terms? Because there's so many different animal terms that appear in the Tanakh. Here we have 36 listed, and I don't even think that's all of them. We'll probably run across a couple in each year. I run across a couple more that I didn't add to the list, and I'm sure that'll happen here. And it's kind of like the Eskimos with snow, right? They have many words for snow, as the legend goes. I don't know if that's really true. I assume it is. But so the ancient Israelites had many words for animals, and each word meant something very specific. And not only that, when it's translated into English, you kind of have to be an expert in animals to know what it means in English. So, like, what is a turtle dove? Okay, or what is a gazelle? Or what is a, I don't know, a ewe, E-W-U, right? I mean, E-W-E, right? These are technical terms, even in English. So it gets very confusing. And so that was the reason I started this particular spreadsheet. But there are a bunch of spreadsheets here which we use when we're studying, right? So if you want access to all these spreadsheets, I'm happy to give it to anybody as an observer. I don't want anyone writing me nasty messages in, like, cell G14 or something like that. But as a viewer, I'm happy to give anyone who wants access to the spreadsheet. Just let me know. Okay, so Sa'on. What is Sa'on? Let's look it up. So here we go. Maybe I should make this a little bit bigger too. Sa'on is translated here as flock. Oops, 1 second. Okay, and so here the sex is male or female. The age is any, meaning not have to be young, and it's sheep or goats. Okay, so basically flock animals, any animals that travel in flocks, which are sheep or goats. Okay, for the most part. Okay, and bakar. So what is bakar? Bakar are herd animals. Let's find that. Bakar, translation, herd animals. Okay, so that's bulls and cows, basically. And okay, so those are the only two types of mammals that you're allowed to bring as offerings. Okay, herd animals and flock animals. Notice, or keep in mind, that every single herd animal, every single flock animal, at least it's included in this definition, is what we call kosher. And we'll get to the laws of kosher in chapter 11. In other words, they chew their cud and they have split hooves. You will never see, you're not allowed to bring a non-kosher animal and sacrifice it, or as a sacrifice to Yahweh. Okay. And if you look in Ezekiel, I can't remember the chapter. I think it was 8. No, it wasn't 18. I don't remember. 20, maybe it was. I think we looked at it last week when God's glory leaves the temple. So Ezekiel's given vision, shown all these abominations that the people of Israel are doing, and one of them is bringing filthy animals, meaning unkosher animals, as sacrifices. So that's a big no-no. Okay, verse 3. Im ola korbano min habakar zachar tamim yakrivenu el petach ohel moed yakriv le'ratzon lifnei Yahweh. Okay, so if it's an olah, so now we're going to get into these technical terms of these different types of offering. And I know this can get very technical, and it can potentially be very boring, okay, or as I like to call it, this could be thought of as Torah flyover country, right? No one wants to read these chapters because they're considered boring. But I would claim that these kinds of things are some of the most interesting things in the entire Tanakh, because if you start putting together the entire system, it's just beautiful the way everything kind of fits together. So we'll try to approach it from that angle. And I think we have also, let's see, spreadsheet here. So look at Proverbs, Omer laws, numbers? No, nothing else. Hold on a second here. I got to find where it is. If not, maybe we'll do it right now. What you use Israel tabernacle materials. Interesting. Commentators translate as ger toshav, animal terms, patriarch journey, sacrificial laws. That must be it. Okay, so there. Okay, and then we also have impurity. Okay, so that's something else. So let's see here. So here okay, so we're going to go to this spreadsheet. Okay, whoops, sacrificial laws. So these are all the laws of the sacrifices. Okay, and also I wanted to check one more thing here. Translations. 1 second. Okay, no, it's not here. So I should add it. So an olah. Okay, so what is an olah? Okay, so this is the first type of offering we come across. So there are different types of offerings. There are different types of sacrifices. The first that we're going to come across is something called an olah. Okay, what is an olah? An olah is usually translated as a burnt offering. Okay, but that's not really a good translation. An olah is a fully burnt offering. Okay, it's where the entire animal is burnt on the altar, aside from the blood. The blood is never, the blood is always spilled. But the entire animal is burnt on the altar. This is going to be opposed to some other types of offerings where only part of the animal is burnt and the rest is either discarded or given to the Kohanim as their payment. Okay, but an olah, usually translated as a burnt offering. Let's see if that translated here. Burnt sacrifice is actually a pretty bad translation, and I prefer the translation a fully burnt offering. And actually, I'm going to add that right now to my little spreadsheet. Olah. So this is Leviticus 1:3. So Leviticus 1:3. The Hebrew word is olah. The usual translation is burnt offering. Okay. I'm going to go with fully burnt offering. And comments here. So let's make a very interesting comment about this olah, about this burnt offering. Okay. Well, if we go to the English translations for Leviticus 1, I'm sure we're going to find it, even though I haven't looked. So Leviticus chapter 1. Oops, that's Hebrew. We want the parallel. And it's, I'm sorry, verse 2. No, verse 3. So burnt offering, burnt offering, burnt offering, burnt offering, burnt sacrifice. I'm looking at all the various translations. Burnt sacrifice. So we're getting burnt offering and burnt sacrifice. Okay, burnt offering. So here we have the Britain Septuagint edition. Calls it a whole burnt offering. Okay, that's a much better translation because again, what it really means is the whole thing, and I'll explain the Hebrew behind it, but that's a much better translation. And here, this is the translation I was looking for. So let's read this. This is the Douay-Rheims Bible, which I've never heard of, but who cares? I think I actually have heard of it, but I don't remember what it is. If his offering be Holocaust, and of the herd he shall offer a male without blemish. What the heck does that mean, a Holocaust? Well, that's where the word Holocaust that we know as, related to what happened to the Jews in World War II, that actually is where it comes from. It comes from this burnt offering or this holy burnt offering, this fully burnt offering. Okay. And let me explain what's going on here. Okay. So first of all, the Hebrew. So this type of offering, what I'm calling a fully burnt offering, right? Isn't that what I said I'm calling it? A fully burnt offering. Okay. Which the Brenton Septuagint translation calls a whole burnt offering, and which the Douay-Rheims Bible calls a Holocaust. Okay. Let's talk about the underlying Hebrew word. The underlying Hebrew is olah, and that comes from the underlying root, the Hebrew root. And remember, all words, not all, but most Hebrew words have a 3-letter root. So the Hebrew root here is Allah. Ayin, Amid, Hey. The same word where you get aliyah from when people make aliyah to Israel. So what does it mean? Allah means to go up. Okay, so this means, so this is called an olah. It means an offering that goes up. And what is the implication here? It's an offering that all of it goes up in flames. Is basically the implication here. Okay, olah. It's all, or goes up onto the altar would be another possibility. Okay, it's all put up onto the altar. It's all burnt up by the flames. Okay, so another kind of way we could translate it here, I'm gonna put it here, is an all go up in flames offering. Okay, so I'll add that here. We could also call it and everything goes up in flames offering, if we wanted to be cute. Well, I won't even add that. Okay, because that's really implies here. Okay, and now we get to this word that we see here, this English word in this Dewey Rhymes Bible, the Holocaust. Okay, well, what does the word Holocaust mean? Okay, and again, the Holocaust that we think of that happened in World War II actually comes from the English translations of the burnt offering or of the holy burnt offering into English, into the word Holocaust. We didn't get this word here from what happened in World War II. We got the World War II Holocaust from this translation of the fully burnt offering into English, which is sometimes translated as a Holocaust. And what does the word Holocaust mean in English? Well, hollow means everything, okay? Like holistic, right? Or whole. It's related to the word whole, W-H-O-L-E, holy, right? And cost means burnt, like something that's caustic, that will burn your skin, right? So Holocaust means holy and burnt. It's exactly the same thing that we see here. It's whole burnt. In fact, this Brenton Septuagint edition translation, I am quite sure the reason they're calling it a whole burnt offering is because they're taking this word Holocaust and basically just translating it into more understandable English, because nobody knows what the word Holocaust means. Okay, so hollow, whole, right? And cost, like caustic, burnt. Okay, so it's a Holocaust offering or whole burnt offering. Okay, or and everything goes up in flames offering. Now, why do I call it an everything goes up in flames offering? Because now that relates back to the original Hebrew word, which is an olah, which means to go up. And once again, it's speaking about everything being placed on the altar and going up in flames, as opposed to part of the animal being given to the Kohanim, as we'll see in other types of offerings that we'll get to later. Okay, so that being said, let's go on to the next verse. So imola korbano. So if it's a Holocaust offering, if it's a fully burnt or holy burnt, let's go with holy burnt, because that kind of relates back to. I'll go with holy burnt because that relates back to better to this Holocaust. Okay, holy burnt offering, and let me add here. Okay. Holy burnt expresses or is a more accessible English translation of the word Holocaust. Okay, cool. So we got that. So that's the Holocaust or the holy burnt offering, or the everything goes up in flames offering. Okay. So im ola korbano. So it's one of these types of offerings. Mina bakar zachar tamim. Okay. So now we saw before that we could bring all of the mammals, or all of the offerings have to be from two types of mammals, either the flock animals or the herd animals. Let's get back to that. Sacrificial laws. Okay. And now we're going to talk about, so you could bring burnt offering. You could bring either a flock animal, a herd animal. I'm just going to say a cow or a bull to make it, easy to remember, or sheep. Okay. Even though the flock animals can also include goats, and perhaps other types. I don't claim to be an animal expert, but it can include it includes basically sheep or goat. But so if it's one of these fully burnt offerings, and if it's from the bakar, if it's from the herd animals, then zachar tamim yakrivenu. It has to be a zachar and it has to be tamim. Okay, what is zachar? A zachar is male, and a tamim means an unblemished. Okay, it can't have a blemish on it. Meaning it has to be an animal in good condition, right? Let's say you have, cows that, I don't know, they're missing an ear, or they're lame or something like that. You're not supposed to bring these animals to Yahweh as a gift. Hey, Yahweh gets the best of the animals. He doesn't get the worst of the animals. Imagine, right? Imagine you had a king and once a year, everyone in the kingdom has to present him with a gift. And some people bring really beautiful gifts, and then others they bring like just really crappy gifts, and they keep the beautiful gifts for themselves. Right? That would be wrong. That would really piss off the king. And that's the idea here. The best goes to Yahweh. The best goes to God. You only take the top-notch animals and bring them as sacrifices to Yahweh. And any of the less perfect ones, then you keep for yourself. Okay? And so it has to be tamim, it has to be unblemished, and it has to be a male. All right? So we see this, close this out here. Okay? An unblemished male. So that's that law. So yakrivenu el petach ohel moed, and this is now we see why it's called a korban. Remember, we saw korban means to bring close. Okay, so now we have the verb form of that, or that's based on that underlying root yakrivenu. He will bring it close, or he will cause it to approach el petach ohel moed, to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Okay. So now, where does he take it? He takes it to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Well, we should know now what the tent of meeting is. Let's look at our little map here, map of the tabernacle. Okay. Let's get one that's a bit more descriptive. Here we go. That works. Okay. And I'm going to blow this up. I remember a friend of mine always used to say in Israel, never say, never use the word blow up if you want to make something bigger. Always say enlarge, because people are going to think you're gonna bomb something. So okay, you can see this here, I hope. Actually, here I have a way of doing this. I remember. Let's, 1 second here. Just like that. It's saved. Save desktop. Oh, I gotta plug in a second. Open file. Desktop. There we go. Okay. Good deal. Now we can see it. So right. So we see, where's the tent of meeting? This is the tent of meeting. This is the Ohel Moed. That's where God is living now. Okay. And you shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Where's the entrance of the tent of meeting? It's right here. Here's the sacrifice. This is the bronze altar. Okay. This is the, I don't know, it's brazen altar here. This is not, this is the what's called the kior, the wash basin. And I'm getting a note that my battery is low, so I'll have to take a break in a second. This is the wash basin, the kior, where the Levites wash their hands and feet, okay, to stay clean. And this is the entrance of the tent of meeting. Okay, so you're supposed to bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting. I don't think it means, from the best I remember, I think it means right to the entrance. I think it means here, right to the altar, because that's where it's going to be sacrificed, which is near the entrance. But let's see. Okay, so you bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Yakriv oto le'ritzono lifnei Yahweh, and it might actually mean that, because remember, God's house is, where'd we go? God's house is this tent here. So maybe before you sacrifice it on the altar over here, which is out in the courtyard, then you bring it right to the entrance, okay? And as a way of saying, here, this is a gift for you, Yahweh. This is your gift, and now I'm gonna go barbecue it for you, okay? So shall bring it close. Again, yakrivenu, bring it close to where? You're basically bringing it close to Yahweh. You're causing it to approach. You're causing it to come close to Yahweh. Okay. So yakrivoto le'tzono lifnei Yahweh. So shall bring it close. Le'ritzono lifnei Yahweh. So this is always a difficult word to translate. Ratzon means will or favor. So for his favor. Okay. So basically the implication here is that by bringing him these sacrifices, in this case the fully burnt or the holy burnt sacrifice, right? The Holocaust sacrifice. By first bringing it, okay, let's assume it means directly right in front of the tent of meeting. Okay, you're going to bring it to him. You're going to present it to him right at the entrance to his house. You're going to say, "I've brought the sacrifice." I mean, you're not literally going to say, you're going to say, but you're going to figure to say, "Here, Yahweh, I brought the sacrifice for you. Look, it's a male as you requested. It's unblemished. It's the best of my flock. I'm sorry, in this case, the best of my herd. I brought it for you." Okay, and liritzono, for his favor. So when you sacrifice it to him, he's gonna like it, Okay, he's going to smell the sweet smelling scent, as we will see, and he's going to count it as like he's going to give you a nice good check mark for that, and you're going to earn his favor. He's going to remember you and do good things for you because you have earned his favor by barbecuing this hamburger or barbecuing this cow, this bull for him. Okay, so that's the idea of le ritzono, and I'm being facetious there, or I'm being kind of tongue in cheek, but the idea for real is that le ritzono, okay, that this sacrifice that you brought is to earn his favor. Okay, he will show you his favor towards it. Okay, so lifnei Yahweh, and this lifnei Yahweh again before Yahweh. So what does that mean? That really is saying before the tent of meeting, right? You're going to bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Yahweh lives inside the tent of meeting, right? Where does he live? Sorry, I shouldn't say he lives. His glory, his kavod lives. Where does it live? In the inner sanctum, in the Holy of Holies, on the cover of the ark, the Ark of the Covenant. On the cover, on top of the ark is what's called the kaporet, the ark cover. The kaporet is made out of one piece of gold, one piece of beaten gold, and it has two cherubim. The two cherubim where they face each other between those two cherubim, where they face each other, like between their noses, basically. That's where the glory of God lives. That is the closest that God is to existing on this planet. Again, it doesn't mean that he has any kind of physical shape or form. It never says that he lives there. It's his glory. And we spoke about that last week. I'm not going to get back into it right now, but his glory exists or dwells between the two cherubim of the ark, which is in the inner sanctum, in the Holy of Holies. Okay, so that's what it means when it says lifnei Yahweh. You're bringing it before Yahweh. You're bringing entrance to the house, right? It's like if you order an Amazon package and the guy shows up and he hopefully you won't get, your Amazon package won't get stolen by package pirates, which I understand is a big thing in the United States these days. But the guy's going to bring it up to your stoop and place it at your front door. He's presenting it. He's presenting it before you, and then maybe he'll ring your doorbell if he's a nice guy. I don't know what they do anymore. The Amazon people do. All right, so that's the idea. Okay. Maybe we should even add that for holy and unblemished male. And maybe I should add that here. So it's Leviticus 1:3. And you shall bring it, okay, fully burnt offering, the animal must be an unblemished male. And we'll just add this. And it is brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Okay, so that's that. Let's go on to Leviticus 1:4. And I hope, is this stuff interesting to you guys? Because again, I find it absolutely fascinating, and I hope my fascination with the subject is rubbing off on you guys. But so many people, it's just, I mean, I kid you not. If you go to a Beit Knesset and to a synagogue and they're reading these parshas, you will literally see like people asleep in the audience. Like they'll just doze off. It's so boring to them because it's made boring. It's really made boring, but it's not. It is not boring. It's fascinating. The whole Levitical system is just super fascinating, in my opinion. Okay, so we're in verse 4. Usamach yado al rosh ha'olah udirsa lo lechaper alav. Okay, so he shall place his hands, rest his hands on the head of the Holocaust offering, the head of the fully burnt offering, the holy burnt offering, with nirtsalo, and I'll get to that in a second, lechaper alav, and it will be counted as favor towards him to atone for him. So who is he? Who is this he? Who's the one doing the action? It's the person who brings the sacrifice. Okay, so basically he's now, in a certain sense, transferring his sins over to this burnt offering, or at least he's transferring, or he's basically saying that whatever favor you're going to give to this offering, let it atone for me and let it be transferred back towards me. Okay, so the person, Joe whatever Smith, or maybe Smithberg, Joe Smithberg comes to bring his burnt offering. He brings it up to the courtyard of the tabernacle. The Kohen says, okay, go to the tent of meeting, to the entrance the meeting, present it before God, present it before Yahweh. He puts his hands on the head of the animal, and now when it's solo chaper, and this is now considered in his favor, so that it atones for him. It now will serve as atonement for him. And what's the idea of atonement? Okay, the idea of atonement is basically that you're doing something to be forgiven for your sins. But it's a bit more complicated than that. Basically, it means that you should get a very severe punishment, but because for what you did, okay, whatever it might be, but because Yahweh is so kind and so merciful, he's going to give you a break because he doesn't want to hurt you. He wants to find as many possibilities to give you a break and to forgive you and to excuse you. So what you could do is you can get away, sometimes literally with murder. No, you can't get away with murder. That's one of the things that cannot be forgiven. But you get away with something you've done by, and not get the full punishment for it by, in a sense, by transferring that sin onto the animal, and now the animal is killed instead of whatever was supposed to happen to you. And yes, it does sound cruel. I can get to a whole long talk about animal sacrifices and were they just a sign of the times back then because all of the nations did it and this is just the way Israel, and I don't want to go down that whole road right now. I have my own opinions on it, but it's relevant. But that's the idea. So basically, you're transferring your sins onto the animal, not all the time, not all offerings are sin offerings, but in the case of atonement, you're transferring your sins onto the animal, okay? And the animal is being killed instead of you being punished for whatever you did wrong. And there's a really, I mean, think about what's going on here, right? Imagine you're taking now, right? Think about you're an ancient Israelite and what this really means to you, okay? You're taking one of the top animals for your herd or your flock, in this case, the herd. Okay, so that's already a lot of money, okay? So you're now suffering a monetary loss, right? I don't know how much a good cow costs in this day and age. Maybe some of my friends from Texas could tell me, but growing up in New York City, I have no idea. I don't know, $1,000, let's say, right? So you're taking $1,000, okay? You're taking your top cow, one of your top cows, or one of your top bulls, okay? And then you're transferring your sins onto this animal, and this poor animal has done absolutely nothing wrong, has to die because of your sins, okay? Just to save your ass, this poor animal now has to die, okay? And so one of the first things to realize is that by bringing the sacrifice, you're taking responsibility, or at least you're acknowledging that you sinned, right? And that's already a very big step, which a lot of people can't even do, right? Many people even they've done wrong. So by taking this animal from your house, and again, let's say many years later, when the temple has already been built in Jerusalem, I don't know, you live in the Golan Heights, you take this animal all the way from the Golan Heights to Jerusalem, okay? You're $1,000 cow, and you're now, by even doing this act, okay, by putting your hands on this animal, by bringing it there and then putting your hands on this animal and presenting before Yahweh, you're to gain atonement. You're already admitting, you're already copping to your own sins. You're already acknowledging the fact that you were less than perfect, and that's already is something that God wants. Right? If a person recognizes and realizes and admits they've done something wrong, then that's already a big thing in God's eyes, right? Imagine if you're a parent and your child has done something wrong and he's denying it. No, I didn't do anything wrong. He's being stubborn. He or she's being a little jerk. And then finally, she comes up to you and says, "Mommy, Daddy, I admit that what I did was wrong." Okay. Well, at that point, you're going to be much more likely to forgive him or her, and it's the same idea here. So that's what's going on. And then, okay, you're not scot-free, but now Daddy, Big Daddy up in the sky is going to say, "Okay, well, you're admitting you've done wrong. You've brought this very expensive gift to basically earn my favor, to prove to me that you're serious about taking responsibility for what you've done wrong. So I don't really have to punish you anymore. I was really planning, you were going to be grounded for like 3 weeks, but I don't really have to do that anymore because you've apologized for what you've done. You've admitted, you've taken responsibility, you've apologized for what you've done, and you've proven that by bringing me, by presenting me with this, this thing that means a lot to you, right? Which proves that you're not just, it's not just words, you're serious about it. Okay. And so then the sin is transferred over to the animal. The animal is killed. Sadly, sad, but better than you, I guess. And then you gain this atonement. God says, okay, I was planning to punish you, but I'm not going to punish you. It's it. The case is closed. We're done. Let's just move on. And that's really the idea of what's going on with these sacrifices. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Okay. All right. So where were we? That is verse 4. Let me make sure I have that logged here. So for fully burnt offering, the person bringing his lay his hand on the hand of the game. Okay, we got that. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, it's freezing. Oh, I gotta plug in anyway. Oh, it's got 3%. Oh shoot, I see what's going on. Okay. I'll be right back, guys. Let's see if I can plug this in before the computer goes completely off. Racing this time. Okay. No, it's not charging. Why is it not charging? It is not charging. Okay. Strange. Now it's charging. Whoa, at 1%. Okay. What's going on here? Oh, it's doing this. I gotta restart. No, are we back? Okay, I think we might be back. Can you guys hear me? Sound check, sound check. Can you guys hear me? Yes? Okay, cool. All right, I think we saved it. It's down to 1%. Okay, so we're in verse 4. So verse 4. So the person, oops. We're in verse 3. Okay. Now we're to verse 4. Samach yedo al rosh ha'olah, nitzah lo lechaper alav. Verse 4. Okay, yeah, good. Now we're up to verse 5. Okay, verse 5. Okay, ושחט את בן הבקר לפני יהוה, ויקריבו בני אהרון הכהנים את הדם, וזרקו את הדם על המזבח סביב אשר פתח אוהל מועד. So he shall kill, ושחט את בן הבקר, so he shall kill the ben habakar. This basically means the young bull. Okay, and we'll get to that in a second. לפני יהוה, before יהוה, ויקריבו בני אהרון הכהנים את הדם, וזרקו את הדם. Okay, so let's pick it apart a little bit more carefully. Okay, so we'll start here. Shachat et ben abakar. So this is referring to the same person, the person who brought the sacrifice, right? And I want to verify that because it could mean the Kohanim, but I think we spoke about this last year. So the person who brought the sacrifice, who laid his hands on the head of the sacrifice, he is now going to slit the neck of this animal. Okay, Lifnei Yahweh. Okay, before Yahweh. Again, that is referred to in the courtyard. Vikrivu b'nei Aaron, and now the Kohanim are going to take over. The sons of Aaron, the Kohanim, ikrivu, they will bring it close. Et adam. So they're going to now take the blood. Uzarku et adam ala mizbeach saviv, asher petach ohel moed. Okay. Now they are going to sprinkle the blood around the altar, okay, asher petach ohel moed, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And this now clarifies the facts. Okay, so the altar is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So I guess that means that. So it wasn't clear what this meant here, that the person has to bring it right to the entrance of the tent of meeting. So now this clarifies that it doesn't mean he has to bring it right to the entrance of the tent of meeting. He just brings it, I guess, right to the altar over here, okay? Because this altar is also being described as being at the entrance to the tent of meeting, okay? So forget that, scratch that, and sorry, I learned something new every time I go through these verses, so, I have to correct myself from time to time. So scratch that, walking right up to the entrance of the tent of meeting with the animal, okay, right here. It would seem to imply that he just goes basically to the altar. He puts his hands on the head of the animal. He himself slaughters the animal. Then the Kohanim take over. They take the blood and they throw it or dump it at the base of the altar, around the base of the altar. Okay. Okay. And let me just check one thing. Let's go to a Robert Alter on this one. Open up Robert Alter. This we can close out. Bookmarks. Torah. Robert Alter. Just give me a second here. So Leviticus 1. Let me copy this. Page 876. Page 876. Let's make this a little bit larger. 876. And let's go over here to the commentary. Okay, so let's get a little Robert Alter on these verses, okay? So verse 1, and he called to Moses and the Lord spoke to him. The translation, and that's too complicated. We don't need to go through that right now. Any person. Okay, so verse 2. So now he's speaking about this verb to bring close, right? Hikriv, remember we spoke about that in verse 2. And Robert Alter says the verb hikriv throughout this text has a technical sense of introduce or present. And I think that's the perfect translation. Present, okay? In the sacred space of the cult. And cult doesn't mean a cult like Aish Torah or the Scientologists. Cult in the academic sense, when it's speaking about religions, means the systematic worship of a god. Okay, so the cognate noun korban offering is distinctive of Leviticus. Exodus concluded with a notice of God's relationship with Israel in the wilderness, indicating how he led the people on its peregrinations, which just means to and fro's, its wanderings, with the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Now, the tabernacle having been completed, Exodus 35 to 37, attention is turned to how Israel, on its part, is to pursue its relationship with God by offering sacrifices in the sanctuary that has been constructed. So that's kind of what we were alluding to earlier. Okay, so let's just do one thing here. Oops. So ikriv is, I think that's the perfect translation. Present. Yeah, well, we'll just leave it for another time. Okay. Or maybe I want to add it. Ikriv. Give me 1 second here. So I have certain words that I like to translate a certain way. I have that here. So let's add that here. No, I'm not going to do it now. Just take too much time. I'll do it another time. Okay, so let's move on. Verse 5. So here, this is the verse we're in. He shall slaughter. The person presenting the offering butchers the animal, and then the priests take charge of laying out the parts on the altar and burning them. Okay? So that's what I wanted to confirm, because that verb in the Hebrew could be, I mean, it's pretty clear that it means the person himself, but it could mean sometimes, I won't get into the grammatical detail, but sometimes the third person can be as the passive. It could mean that it was done. But I just want to confirm Robert Alter's opinion on that. So yes, the person who brings the sacrifice, he's the one who slaughters the animal. Okay. So again, getting back to what we were saying, it's not, he doesn't just lay his hand on the animal and then it's done. Now he has to slaughter the animal, right? He's really seeing firsthand the effects in the real world of whatever sin he has done, whatever bad thing he has done. He is now causing the death of an innocent animal who never did anything, right? Imagine taking your dog or your cat and slaughtering them because you've done something wrong, right? The thought is just horrible. Okay, well, people don't usually have that kind of connection to their flocks or their herds, but still, it's just a horrible thing to have to take an animal and that animal now has to die because you've done something wrong, right? It's all meant to be a very visceral, a very very using all the five senses to be immersive. I think is the word they like to use, right? A very immersive experience where you see what your sins, what your wrongdoing in this world have caused. You have now caused another animal to die, an innocent animal. Yes, not an innocent human being, but still it's an innocent animal. And now you actually have to kill the animal, right? And I know that that there's this big thing, right? Or this idea, I think, which has gained a lot of popularity, I think, in recent years in the United States, or maybe in the recent decade or so, which is to not be separated from the meat that you eat. Okay, so it's okay. So the theory goes, it's okay to eat meat, right? And clearly the Torah allows us to eat meat. I personally am a vegetarian, but I don't think that people have to be vegetarians. And I will eat chicken once in a while. In fact, last night I ate duck, but that's another story. Once in a while, very rarely. But I haven't eaten red meat in decades. Okay, but nonetheless, the idea goes that if you're going to eat meat, then it shouldn't be just some package you pick up in the grocery store, in the supermarket, that says 3.2 pounds, $12 or something like that, right? Because that separates you from the actual act that had to take place in order to get that meat on your table, which is killing the animal. So you should, if you're going to eat an animal, it's okay, but you should have to go out and hunt the animal and kill the animal yourself. Okay, so that way you have that connection with what's really going on with the animal that you've killed. It's not just, it doesn't just depersonalize. We can't say dehumanize the animal. De-animalize the animal and just turn it into a product. I think it was, who was it? Mark Zuckerbucks, that maybe a couple of years ago, I think once a year he makes, or every year he makes some kind of resolution what he's going to do, and they always seem to be a giant disaster. I think one year he went around the United States and said he wanted to eat dinner with regular people, and I think that was like a disaster or something like that. I don't remember, but at any rate, I think one year he said he's going to kill his own meat. So he actually spent the hunting and eating the meat that he hunted, right? So there actually is a very important point behind this, and we see this here in the sacrifice. Okay, it's not just you're going to go to the Stop and Shop, that's the supermarket where I used to live in New York, or I don't know, Piggly Wiggly. Do they still have Piggly Wigglies? It's not going to go that you're just going to run to the Piggly Wiggly and pick up some chopped meat and then and just give it, chuck it on the altar and make hamburgers out of it. No, you are going to have to place your hand on this animal that you brought, and then you're going to have to slaughter the animal with your own hands. In other words, you're going to have a immersive experience, an immersive understanding, and an immersive experience showing you the results of your sin that you are now trying to gain atonement for. Okay. So, and then we have the phrase ben bakar. So above it said bakar. Okay. Now we have Ben Abakar. Let's check on that. So let's go to our animal terms. So we have Ben Yonah, Ben Bakar. So Ben Bakar is specifically a calf. So it's a young bull or a cow. Okay, in this case, we know that it has to be a zachar, it has to be a male, so it's going to be a young bull. Okay, it's a calf. So we're getting more details. Lifnei Yahweh. We krivu b'nei Aaron. So basically now the Kohanim take over and they spill the blood, right? So let's add that to our little list here. So we're going back to sacrificial laws. Okay, so the Kohen takes the blood of the slaughtered animal and dashes it all around the altar of sacrifice. Really not dashes, more like pour. So I'm going to update this and pours it. Okay, and as we shall see, the blood, and we will talk a lot about the blood of the sacrifice, right? For those of my friends who are coming out of a Christian background, that's a very important topic. Okay, and but we'll talk a lot about the blood of the sacrifice, but not now. Okay, so right, so that's verse 5. So we now saw that the altar of sacrifice is being described as being, where is it? This altar of sacrifice is being described at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So it doesn't literally mean here. This all the way over here could be at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So it means that when the person brings his burnt offering, his Holocaust, his fully burnt offering, his everything goes up in flames offering, it doesn't mean that he has to bring it literally to the door of the tent here. It just means he brings it over to the area of the altar. Okay. Right, I'm just mentioning that because I implied earlier that he has to bring it right to the entrance, but I'm correcting myself now, and I will probably be correcting myself on a bunch of stuff because every time you go through this stuff, it's something new. Okay, so that's that. Verse 6. Okay, we've sheet et ola wa nitachota le nitaheha. So sheet basically means to skin or to dress. I think they usually translate it as. He shall, translate here. It just basically means prepare, skin. Let's see how they translate. Let's see how Robert Alter deals with that one. It's 6. Flay. There we go. So what is the technical definition of flay? Fine. Flay. Okay. Strip the skin off. Okay, so it's basically to skin, right? And ifshit, the word ifshit literally means to undress, even in modern Hebrew, okay? If you want to tell, if the doctor wants to tell the patient, okay, go in the other room and undress, say ifshit, okay? So in this case, you're undressing the animal of its skin. You're skinning the animal, flaying the animal, okay? And then you're going to cut it up into pieces, okay? And we'll get a detailed description of what pieces go where. But in the case of a burnt offering, we'll see it all goes up on the altar, okay? But basically, it's butchered. It's flayed, it's skinned, and then it's butchered. That's what verse 6 is saying. Let's see if we've logged that here. Okay, we got that. Verse 7. ונתנו בני אהרון הכהן אש על המזבח וערכו עצים על האש. So now the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, okay? So the sons of Aaron, so what does it mean, the sons of Aaron and the Kohanim? Why does it mention, we've seen it now twice, where it says bnei Aaron HaKohanim? Because the Kohanim means priest. Okay? In fact, we see the word Kohen not relating necessarily to a priest Yahweh. We saw, for instance, that Moses' father-in-law was a Kohen in Midian, okay? And the word there that's used is Kohen. We saw that that Potipharah, who gave his daughter Osnat to Joseph as wife, and from whence came Ephraim and Manasseh, that he was a priest to On. Okay, so in fact, second, really more for my own curiosity than anything. So here we have, this is talking about Melchizedek was a Kohen El Elyon. He was a Kohen to the Most High God. And then Potiphera Kohen. And this is Genesis 41:45. Hebrew. So Potiphera is his father-in-law, and he was a Kohen to On, the foreign god. Okay. Actually, they say here it's a city in northern Egypt. Okay, so he was a priest at the city in northern Egypt, but ostensibly also to a foreign god. They weren't worshiping Yahweh in Egypt in Moses' time, that's for sure. Okay, so here we see the word Kohen. Okay, so Kohen just means priest, and that's why it says Bnei Aaron HaKohanim, because Bnei Aaron HaKohanim means the sons of Aaron, the priests. Okay, priest is just their occupation or their role within Israel, and the dynasty that are the priests within Israel, we know, are the sons of Aaron. Okay, and that's why it mentions both of them. So when you hear the word Kohen, when you meet someone, I don't know, let's say you're buying jewelry in New York City and you run into someone named Yankel Kohen, okay, it doesn't mean that name Kohen doesn't necessarily mean that he's, I mean, now it does, that he's a Jew, but the word Kohen, at least in ancient times, could apply, or at least in ancient Hebrew, could apply, and even in modern Hebrew, can apply to a priest to any god, not necessarily the sons of Aaron. But here it was specifying that the Kohanim for the nation of Israel were the sons of Aaron. Okay. So at any rate, the Natnu Bnei Aaron Kohen Ish Al HaMizbeach. So they ignite. They get the fire burning on the altar. Okay. And Mizbeach, altar is probably a bad translation. Okay, one of the great translations is Everett Fox, which you can get online for free. Let me open that one up. And what he does, what he's very good at doing, is taking the Hebrew words and finding appropriate English words that really express the Hebrew root. And actually, Robert Alter does that pretty well too. But let me just see if I can find here. Torah, Everett Fox. And so Leviticus, where are we? We're in Leviticus 1:6. Yeah, great. See, we see it right there. He doesn't call it an altar. He calls it a slaughter site. Okay, because in Hebrew it's called the mizbeach. The underlying root there is zevach, zayin, bet, het, and zavach means to slaughter. Okay, in other words, to slaughter an animal after you've hunted it. In other words, right, or after you to slaughter an animal in preparation for eating it or whatever. Okay, to slaughter. Okay, so he doesn't call it an altar; he calls it a slaughter site, and that's a much better translation. Okay, so let's use his translation. So the children of Aaron, the priests, place or set the fire, or they light a fire on the slaughter site. And they set up wood. They place wood on top of the fire. In other words, they get a nice barbecue going, a nice bonfire going. Okay, and let's see if we have that logged. 7. Yeah, nothing much to say there. Verse 8. Okay, so now they're going to take the pieces. The priests are now going to take the pieces. Et harosh v'et hapaver al etzim asher al ha'esh asher al hamizbech. So now they're going to take the pieces. So remember, The person who brought the sacrifice, he put his hands on the sacrifice, and then he killed the sacrifice. He slit the sacrifice's neck, the animal's neck, with his own hands. Then the priests take over, the Kohanim take over. They flay it, they skin it, and then they cut it up into pieces. They butcher it, and now they're going to put the pieces, the butchered pieces, on the slaughter site, on the fire, and that's going to be the head and the pader. And this is translated here as fat. Let's see how Everett Fox translates it. The suet, which is basically fat. And Robert Alter goes with the fat, right? So they're placing the head and the fat on the altar. Okay. Ala itzim asher ala esh asher ala mizbech, which is on the wood, which is on top of the burning fire, which is on the slaughter site. Okay, so let's log that. Yep, we got that. Let's move on. Verse 9. Wikirbo, ukira'au, yirhatz b'mayim, wa'iktira kohen et hakol hamizbecha, ola ishe reach nichoach leYahweh. Okay, so now we have other parts. So the head and the fat was thrown directly on the fire. Okay, kirbo is innards. It's usually translated. Entrails are translated here. Kira'au is legs. So they're washed. Okay, they're washed in water. We tirakon et akola mizbecha, and then let's get a Everett Fox on that one. So the innards, its innards and its shins, he is to wash in water, and the priest is to turn all of it into smoke upon the slaughter site for an offering up, a fire offering of soothing savor for Yahweh. Okay, that's a great translation, actually. So okay, so we have the innards or the entrails and the legs are washed in water. I'm not a great butcher, so I don't know why the legs are specifically washed in water. I guess the innards are kind of like nasty. They got all kinds of stuff going on. So before they're thrown on the altar, they're washed. The legs or the shins, I'm not sure why. Okay. And then we tir hakohen et hakol hambecha, and basically he burns everything up on the altar, on the slaughter site. So the Kohen burns everything up on the slaughter site. As in olah. Okay, olah is that word we saw before, that Holocaust or a fully burnt offering. Okay, and let's do Everett Fox on this one. So, and the priest to turn all of it into smoke upon the site for an offering up, a fire offering of soothing savor for Yahweh. And there's a lot more to say there, but I want to go ahead. Okay. Ishareach ishe. So we have here the word ishe, okay, which is a fire offering. Reach nichoach liYahweh, and as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. So this idea that Yahweh smells the meat, right? Have you ever been like driving down your neighborhood and I don't know, the neighbors are having a barbecue, and even I as a vegetarian, if I'm driving down and I smell a barbecue going, it's like it really just it tempts me very much to want to run over there and start eating meat, even though I haven't eaten meat in decades, right? So it's the same idea. God is gonna smell the barbecue in his backyard, and he's going to. It's a tempting scent for him, and this is going to allow him to. This is going to put him in a good mood to forgive whoever it is asking for atonement from him. Okay, let's get a translation here for Ishe. So Robert Alter translates that as a fire offering or an offering up. 1 second. No. It's a smoke offering on the slaughter for an offering up, a fire offering. So he translates it as. And do we have definition of what a fire offering is specifically? All right, we'll leave that for now and let's go on. Okay. Or do we have, let's see, 1 second here. Laws. Put that in translations, right? Translations is where I have burnt offering. Okay, so fire offering. All right, let's go to Robert Alter for a second. Let's see if there are any other comments here. Okay. Okay, so that's all the okay. That's all he asked for that. Let's move on, verse 10. So let's just summarize here. So from here to here, we're talking about the herd animals. We're talking about bulls and cows. Okay. Remember, if you want to bring a fire offering, I'm sorry, a holy burnt offering, a Holocaust offering, it has to be either from the herd animals or the flock animals. So first we start with the herd animals, and these are the rules for the herd animals from here to here. Okay. Now we go into the flock animals in verse 10, and let's see what we have here. Okay. Ve'im min hasaon korbano mina kvasim mina izim. By the way, Volki, here we have the word kvasim, and it's used in the general sense of sheep. Okay, not necessarily baby sheep. Okay, Leviticus chapter 1, verse 10. Okay, Ve'im, you can look it up yourself. Leviticus 1:10. Ve'im mina tzon korbano mina kvasim o mina izim le'olah. So if it's from the flock animals, if the offering is from the flock animals, then it has to be mina kfasim. The kfasim are the sheep, or mina izim, or the goats. So it has to be sheep or goats. Le'olah, for a burnt offering, and we're still talking here about burnt offerings. Zachar tamim yakrivenu. It has to be a male, has to be unblemished, and it is presented to God as such. Okay, verse 11. V'shachat oto, and let me just make sure I have that logged. So that's verse 10. Oops, where'd we go? Sacrificial laws, verse 10. Okay, so here we have the herd. Here we have the flock. Okay. Shachatoto al yerech hamizbech tzfona ifnei Yahweh. So it's now to be slaughtered. So now we have a specific place where this person is to slaughter this the sheep or the goat, and it's on the north side of the altar or of the sacrifice place. What did Everett Fox call it again? The slaughter site. Okay, the north side of the slaughter site. Let's take a look. Okay, so this is the north side right here. This is the slaughter site, so it's here. Why the north side? I have no idea. Okay, the only thing I could say is we could take a look at what else is going on in the north side. Okay, if you go into the holy area, the north side is where the showbread, this is the table of showbread, is also on the north side. I don't know, maybe they're going to make hamburgers out of it. I guess that would be more like a gyro. I don't know. No, I'm just being silly here. I don't know. I have no idea why it's on the north side, but it's on the north side of the altar. Okay. But it is interesting to point out that when it came to the herd animals, it was never said where on what side of the altar it has to be slaughtered. But for the flock animals has to be specifically on the north side of the altar. Why? I have no idea. I'm sure the rabbis come up with a bunch of silly reasons. Okay, Lifnei Yahweh. So again, they spill the blood around the altar. That's verse 11. Let me make sure I have that logged. Okay. Cool. Verse 12. Wanitach oto. Nitachau wa'et rosho wa'et pidro. So now we basically have a replay of what we saw with the herd animals. So the Kohen now cuts it up into pieces with the rosho at the pidro, and puts aside or takes the head and the fat. And the Kohen places them or tosses them up onto the wood, which is on the fire, which is on the slaughter site, right? Is that what he's calling it again? Slaughter site, did we say? Slaughter site on the altar. Okay, the altar of sacrifice. It's a more traditional translation. Okay, so it's basically like the bull, the herd animal. Okay, it's very similar so far. The only difference we see is that with the sheep and the goats, and they have to be, for some reason which we don't know, slaughtered on the north side of the altar, of the slaughter site. Verse 13. وهكرف وكرعיים ירחץ במים ויקריב הכהן את הכל ויתיר המזבחה עולה הוא אישה ריח ניחוח ליהוה. So this time we have the entrails again, and it's the same words exactly, right? Yeah, kirbo v'kirav, it's the same things. So it's again the entrails and the legs are washed in water, and then the entire thing, to make a long story short, is burnt on. Tir literally, as Everett Fox correctly translates it, is sent up in smoke or brought up into smoke on the top of the altar as a fire offering, a pleasant smelling scent to Yahweh. So it's basically the same thing. So we treat the herd animals, meaning the bulls and cows, the same as the flock animals, meaning sheep and goats. The only big difference is that the flock animals, sheep and the goats, are slaughtered on the north side of the altar for some reason that we don't know why. Some reason that we don't know. And that's it. This is the olah, right? This is the fully burnt offering. So we see everything gets thrown onto the altar. Okay, that's maybe the main thing to point out about this type of offering. Okay, we kriv hakohen et hakol, we tira mizbecha olah. Okay, so the Kohen, I'll translate this here. He kriv hakohen et hakol. So the Kohen offers everything, the whole thing. Okay, and burns it on the altar as a fully burnt offering, as a Holocaust offering, as a holy burnt offering. Okay, a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. So once again, this is the Olah offering. This is the first type of offering we've come across, and it's a fully burnt, a holy burnt, a Holocaust offering where the entire animal is thrown up onto the altar. The only part of the animal we've seen so far, and pay attention here, right? This is important. The only part of the animal that does not end up on the altar is what? The blood, because the blood never goes on the altar. Okay, the blood gets drained and gets poured at the base of the altar. So the blood of the sacrifice gets always poured. I'll say always. In this case, gets poured at the base of the altar. Okay. Okay. Verse 14. So now we're going to the birdies. The poor little birdies are now going to get barbecued. So now we have a fully burnt offering for the birdies. Okay. Korban Yahweh. We kriv min torim or min b'nei hayonah. So now, just as we had, okay, we were given certain types of animals. Well, not for the herd animals. We were just told herd animals. But for the flock animals, we were told it has to be either a sheep or goat. It can't be other types of flock animals. I don't know what other types of flock animals there are. And now, if it's the birds and it's a burnt offering, and for all of the offerings, there are only two types. It could be mina torim, or min b'nei. And torim is usually translated as I think they translate usually as pigeons or doves. See what they translate as here. Turtle doves, and b'nei hayonah as young pigeons. Okay, so in modern Hebrew, a yonah is a pigeon. So that would have made sense. B'nei hayonah is young pigeons, and torim is turtle doves. So turtle doves and young pigeons. Let's get a Robert Alton on that one. Let's see how he translates it. So he translates it as turtle doves, young pigeons. Everett Fox translates it as turtle doves and young pigeons. Okay, so there's consensus, which is good. Not always consensus, especially when it comes to animal names, Hebrew animal names, or Hebrew plant names, or names of stones, gems, anything that has to do with species or types of things. There's often, if you look at the English translations, you'll often notice that there's a lot of disagreement, which implies that people don't really know what it is. But here we have agreement across at least some of the translations. But it should always be pointed out that it's never 100% clear what these animal names really translate into. And there are professors who have spent their entire careers in Israel and elsewhere trying to figure out what the various animal names mean, what species they're referring to, the various plant names mean. I think there was a famous professor named, what's his name? Felix. A friend of mine introduced me to many. Professor Felix. I think that was his name. Felix. Biblical plant names. What is Felix? No, not this guy. No, that's Linnaeus. Okay, forget it. I don't know. Okay, anywho, just to keep in mind, no one is always or often people, translators are not 100% sure what the actual species are, and there's a lot of disagreements about that often. But in this case, it's not. Okay, verse 15. So we have two types. We've got the turtle dove and we have the young pigeon. Vayikriv, we're in verse 15, Leviticus 1:15. Vayikrivo hakohen el hamizbeach malak et rosho vayiktir hamizbecha unimsad damo al kir hamizbeach. Okay. Let me just make sure that everything's logged here. Up to that verse. Yep, we're good. So, so this time, it's the Kohen, right? So in all the other cases, we saw the person who brings either the herd animal or the flock animal. So in the case of the herd animal, he rests his hands on the animal and then he himself slaughters the animal. So if I'm the one bringing the animal, I rest my hands on the animal, then I slaughter the animal. In the case of the flock animal, the sheep or the goat, it doesn't specifically say that I rest my hand on the animal, which is strange. You could say that it's implied that this is just kind of a shortened form of this. And so therefore it's implied. It's just that it's not repeating all of the laws because it's kind of understood from the laws regarding the herd animals. Or you could say that that part is skipped. I'm sure various commentators have their opinions about that. But at any rate, the person himself slaughters the sheep or the goat. Here, and the same goes for the herd animal, the flock animals, the person who brings the animal, the person who's bringing the sacrifice, right, as atonement, he's the one who slaughters the animal. But here, in the case of the birds, the person does not slaughter the animal. It's the Kohen. It's now handed over to the Kohen. This pigeon or this turtle dove is handed over to the Kohen. Krivo Kohen el hamizbeach, and that the Kohen offers it or brings it close or presents it upon the altar, the slaughter site. Umalak et rosho, and he wrings its neck. Okay, malak. Let's see how they translate it here. Yeah, rings off. They give the same translation. So rings off his neck, right? Again, I ain't no chicken farmer, but I guess for those of you who are, I know they hang the chickens upside down in like these kind of like plastic cones and then slit its neck and let the blood drain. But here, I guess they're just pinching his neck right off. It's a small animal, right? So they just pinch the neck right off. They pinch the head right off, basically. They twist the head off, okay? And that's going to allow the blood to drain as well. So they twist off his head, or they wring his head off. And they get up and put it up in smoke, or put it up in flames literally in smoke, on the altar of sacrifice, on the slaughter site. And his blood is placed on the wall of the altar, on the wall of the slaughter site. Okay, so there's a lot less blood. Obviously, these are small birds, so you don't have to pour all the blood as you did with the bulls and the sheep and the goats. You don't pour the blood at the base of the altar. There isn't that much blood here, so basically it's just tossed against the wall of the altar. Okay, Al Kira Mizbeach. Make sure I have that logged as well. I do have everything pretty well logged so far. Okay. Alrighty, verse 16. Waisir et murato benotata waishlich ota etzel hamizbeach kedma el makom hadashin. Okay, so he takes off his. Okay. All right, so he's wrung his neck. He's wrung the bird's neck. He's drained the blood and tossed it against the walls of the altar. The next thing is he takes off his murato. I think we spoke about this word last year. So it's crop. Okay, and we have to talk about what it is in a second. Benotzata and its feathers, or the crop with its feathers. And then he tosses it near the altar. So in this case, that part is not thrown on the altar. Kedma on the east side, el makom hadashin, in the place where the basically ash heap, okay, or in the garbage pile. Okay. So just to be complete, let's talk about what this means. The crop with its feathers. Oh shoot, it's frozen. No, it's not frozen. Yes, it is frozen. I think we're frozen. I think I have to restart the computer. Yeah, we froze. Okay, I'm restarting the computer. I think you guys might be able to hear me. I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Okay, are we back? Can you guys hear me? Hello? Hello? Somebody give me a yes. I think we're back. Hello? Can you guys hear me? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Oh, maybe I don't have this one. 1 second. Am I connected? Disconnect. Connected. Okay, here. Okay, cool. All right, so it froze. We know this happens at least once every week. All right, let's go on. Let's get through the end of Leviticus 1, and then maybe I'll try to go into express mode. So, because otherwise it really is just going to get too technical, and I don't want to do that. So, where were we? All right, we're saying, yeah, the crop of its feathers. So Robert Alter, this is verse 16. I'm gonna open this again. Open this. I gotta open everything again. That. We're good with that. All right, good, you guys. So where were we? 897, if I remember correctly. 897, right? No. Okay, let's do this differently. Leviticus 876. 876. And we'll go to our commentary here. And yeah. Oh, I didn't share the screen. I remember this time before it was too late. Present. Window. Boom. There we go. Okay, so, okay, it's crop and its feathers. So here Robert Alter explains. There's some question about the meaning of each of these terms. Jacob Milgram, and by the way, he is like, he's, I think they're already dead, but he is one of the world's leading experts on Leviticus, on the entire sacrificial system, the ideas of purity and impurity. Makes an elaborate argument that the first term mur'ah means chrism, whatever that means, which Robert also can explain. The area around the cloacal opening beneath the bird's tail. He's the author. Okay, so forget all that. It's some part of the bird. All right, let's move on. Okay, so he's the author of a 3-volume, 3,000-page commentary on Leviticus that is, in its sheer comprehensiveness, will remain a central reference for philological and historical issues involved in this book. Consequently, his work will often be referred to here. He's an invaluable guide, but of course not infallible. And in the present instance, there remains a margin of conjecture in his identification of mura'ah. And since few readers will understand what a chrism is without recourse to a dictionary, this translation retains the more familiar crop. The second term, notzah, has been linked with the word for excrement by some medieval and modern commentators, but it invariably means feather elsewhere in Hebrew usage. If the skin was stripped from a large animal and not made part of the sacrifice, is logical that the feathers would be excluded in the sacrifice of the bird. So we don't have to get into all the gory details, literally gory details, but so it's crop with its feathers. So let's just look at what is the crop of a bird. Crop of a bird. And we can look at images. Okay, so that's the crop right there. Okay, that's, I don't know, that part. Okay, any chicken farmers out there? I guess you know that it's like right around the neck. Okay, so it doesn't matter right now because we don't have to get into that deep. But the crop or some part of the bird is removed, and feathers removed, either the feathers around the crop or all of the feathers. So Robert Alter seems to be saying just like the skin of the animal is removed. Okay, it should be pointed out that the skin, right? We saw that the skin, so the animal's flayed. Where was that? Yeah, so it seems that the skin is not thrown on the altar. Okay, so that would be the one exception. So the blood, so again, talking about here the bulls and the cows, the animal is skinned, and it's implied that only the, and then cut up into pieces, and it's implied only the pieces are thrown on the altar. Okay, so the skin is discarded, probably on this ash heap that's being spoken about down below. So it's the only part of the fully burnt offering that is not thrown on the altar. And again, even though it mentions it, I think one can assume the same goes for the sheep and the goats. And so in this case, Robert Alter is saying, and I think it's making a good point, that here the feathers are removed, right? So just as the skin is removed from the mammals, so here in the case of the birds, the feathers are removed and the crop. So if it is the crop, so nobody knows, again, there's a disagreement as to what the part is, but if it's that part's also thrown on the ash heap. So there are small little parts of the animal, I guess, which are considered, you know, not good enough to be thrown on the altar, which are discarded, the feathers, the skin, the crop, or whatever it might be, okay? And it's thrown on the ash heap, or the place where the ashes are, okay? Basically, let's see how Everett Fox translates it. I mean, it does mean ash heap. 1 second here. Okay. So Everett Fox translates it as chrism, basing himself on this other commentator, right? This Milgram, by means of its plumage. And by the way, I have the Milgram Group book. It's so detailed, we're not going to really use it that much. And it's from the slaughter site eastward into the place of the ashes. Okay, but basically, it's thrown on the garbage pile. Okay, and then to get to the end of Leviticus 1, Ushisauto b'knafao lo yavdil vayiktiroto hakohen mizbecha ala etzim asher ala esh ola hu ishe reach nichok liyahweh. Okay, so it's shisa lishasea means to split apart, like with cloven hooks, to cleave. So it's cleaved by its wings, but it's not split into two. Okay, so basically, I guess it's kind of, I think they call it like butterflied or something like that. Okay, so he's to tear it open by its wings, but he's not to divide it. Okay, so basically, it's I don't know. I think they call it butterfly in chef's terms. Okay, butterfly chicken. So I guess, oh, we even have we don't need the video. Let's get a picture. Yeah, like that, right? It's like kind of like split in half, right? But it's not. Here we go. This would be it. How to butterfly a whole chicken. So I think that's what it's talking about, right? It's kind of pulled apart into two, but it's not split into two separate pieces. Okay, I think. Okay, so that's that. And again, that's tossed on to the altar on the wood, which is on the fire, as a fully burnt offering, a Holocaust offering, and it's a fire offering. So all three so far, that the flocks, I'm sorry, the herds, the flocks, and the birds are mentioned as fire offerings because these are fire offerings. They're not drink offerings or bread offering or grain offerings. They're fire offerings. a sweet-smelling scent to Yahweh. And that brings us to the end of Leviticus 1, right? Kind of technical, but again, we see here it's really kind of logical, right? The things that God wants, that Yahweh wants on the altar, it's a fully burnt offering, and we'll understand the meaning later on, these fully burnt offerings. There are certain parts, the blood is always spilled at the base of the altar, or in the case of the birds, sprinkled on the walls of the altar because there's only a little bit of blood there. There's certain parts that are discarded, like the skin, the feathers, the crop. But other than that, everything, other than the blood and the skin and the bird, the crop, everything is tossed onto the altar. That's why it's called a fully burnt offering, or a holocaust, hollow meaning whole, and cost meaning burnt, a fully holy burnt offering, or an olah. Again, olah means, in Hebrew, it's an olah offering. Olah means to go up. So I like to call it a everything goes up in flames offering. Okay, because that's the idea. It's all thrown onto the altar. It all goes up in flames, except for the blood and the skin. Okay. Alrighty. So that's the end of Leviticus chapter 1. Let's go on to Leviticus chapter 2. And it's getting pretty late. We've been going at this now for how long? Almost 3 hours. I haven't taken a break. I'm going to take a break. But okay, let's go on to 2, and we can see how far we can get. I'll probably end pretty soon, but I think you get the idea of how these chapters work, at least when it's describing the different types of sacrifices. And you really have to become a kind of like a PhD in the sacrificial system, like this guy Milgram did, to really understand how all the pieces, no pun intended, fit together. And I certainly don't have the depth of understanding about it that Milgram does, because he dedicated his entire life to it. Each time I go through it, I pick up some more, which is great. All right. But if you really want to stay up all night reading a book, then you could read the Milgram book. Let's see if I can open it here, just to show you what it is. Where did I stick it? Pictures. Milgram, there it is. And this is just Leviticus 1 through 16. It's called the Anchor Bible. New translation with introduction commentary by Jacob Milgram. Okay, so this is just Leviticus 1 through 16. It's 1,182 pages. So he goes into huge amounts of detail, as you can see through the contents here. It's a good read. So the sacrificial system, introduction, the burnt offering from the herd, from the flock. So I guess we could look at it for a second, just to see maybe what he has to say. The page, only on one page there for some reason. Okay, so 133. Actually, let's pass that right, because the introductory pages. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, okay, got it. Oh man, he's good. So 133. All right, so let's just read what he says, just to get an idea. So this is a translation notes. It's too detailed. Okay, too detailed. We can't do it. We're not going to do it. Okay, let's go on to chapter 2. So we are now in chapter 2. Okay. Okay, the nefesh ki takriv korban mincha. So if you're going to bring now a grain offering, so this is now, so chapter 1 were fire offerings, or it was the fully burnt offering, but that was a type of fire offering. Okay, this is not a fire offering. This is a grain offering. This is not burnt. This is presented. Okay. Okay. The nefesh ki takriv korban mincha. So a person who would like to bring a grain offering to Yahweh. Okay, so now we're going to get the overall understanding of what type of grain offerings you're allowed to bring to Yahweh. Okay, solet. So what is solet? Solet is usually translated as fine flour. Fine not meaning finely ground, fine meaning top-notch flour. So let's see how Robert Alter renders that one. Translates as fine semolina. And then his comment on that is, so he says the early rabbis plausibly understood the grain offering as an accessible cultic vehicle for the common people who might have been hard put to meet the expense of animal sacrifice. So sometimes you can sacrifice animals or mammals with birds and birds with grains, okay, depending on if you don't have enough money. The term for grain offering, mincha, is borrowed from the political realm, where its primary meaning is tributary payment, and thus it expresses Israel's relationship of vassal to God, okay? So mincha really means a gift. But in this case, it means the gift of a grain offering. Okay. Okay. So it should be fine flour. Let's see how Everett Fox translates that. I don't like the translation fine flour. So here he does a much better job of proper flour. Okay. So usually it means high quality flour. Okay. I mean, not usually, that's what it means, but it's usually translated as fine flour, which I find to be ambiguous, because does that mean fine, like finely ground flour, or does that mean fine, like fine quality? And really what it means is the latter, fine quality, okay? So that shall be his offering. Yitzak aleh shemen, so he pours upon it oil, and whenever we see the word oil, it means only one and one type of oil, or one and only one type of oil, and that's olive oil, okay? And other types of oil are not mentioned anywhere in the Tanakh that I could think of, with the exception of, I believe, in Song of Songs, it speaks about shemen egozim, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong about that one. But whenever oil is mentioned, it means olive oil. Natan aleha livona, and then frankincense is placed upon it. Okay, livona is frankincense. What is frankincense? Let's take a look. Okay, so we can Wikipedia it a little bit. Okay, so there's a picture of frankincense. Let's just learn a little bit about frankincense. So frankincense, also known as olibanum, is an aromatic resin used in incense and perfumes obtained from the trees of the genus Boswellia in the family whatever. Okay, so here's a picture of the leaves of the frankincense tree from where the frankincense is obtained. The word is from Old French, frank incense, high quality incense. There are several species of Boswellia that produce true frankincense. Blah, 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 blah. Resin from each is available in various grades, which depends on the time of harvesting. We don't need the etymology. So high quality incense, frankincense. Although frank is ultimately derived from the tribal name, it's not being used with reference to the word frankincense. Okay. Okay, so you read on just a little bit. The word for frankincense in Koine Greek, so Koine Greek was kind of common Greek, of the New Testament, Libanos, is cognate with the name of Lebanon. The same can be said with regard to Arabic, Phoenician, Hebrew, and Vulgar Latin, Libanus. This is postulated to be because they both derive from the word for white, and that the spice root went from Mount Lebanon. Okay, so it should be pointed out that in biblical Hebrew the word is livona. Okay, so that sounds already, so frankincense, that already sounds like Lebanon, livona, or lavan. The word for the word lavan in Hebrew means white. Okay, so livona. So I don't know if they're claiming that the biblical Hebrew word comes. I guess they are claiming that it comes because it was. One second. Name Lebanon. The name Lebanon simply regard the postulated to be because they derive from the word white, and that the spice went via Mount Lebanon. Okay, so that's what it's claiming. That's what Rabbi Wikipedia is claiming that the word livona, the word for frankincense, livona, is related to the word Livanon, which means Lebanon in modern and ancient words, and in English, right? Lebanon, the country Lebanon, or the area Lebanon. And the reason that Lebanon is called Lebanon, so the Hebrew word for white is lavan, just like Jacob's Jacob, who we went to stay with, Lavan, right? It's the same one. It's the same root. Okay. But Lebanon, why is Lebanon called Lebanon? Because if you go up into Lebanon, if you go north of modern day Israel, then you see Lebanon has a lot of tall mountains. Okay. Mount Hermon, which is on the northernmost border of the current day borders of the state of Israel, is part of that mountain range that stretches all up into Lebanon. So there are two mountain ranges in Lebanon. One is called I think it's called the Lebanon Mountains and the Anti-Lebanon Mountains, and then there's valley in between the two. And so these tall mountain ranges are covered with snow, right? Not throughout the entire year, but throughout most of the year or much of the year. And so Lebanon got its name because of these snow-covered peaks dominate its landscape. So it really means the land of the snow-covered peaks, or the land of the white, or the land of whiteness, right? Based on the snow-covered peaks. And so they're claiming here, again, I don't know if this is the reason, but this is what Rabbi Wikipedia is claiming that it's called Livona because the spice was derived from Lebanon. Okay, maybe not. And then we have here the other word for frankincense, olibanum, which is clearly coming from the ancient Hebrew livona, right? Olibanum. And I'm sure it's going to say that here. This is postulated, blah, blah, blah. And medieval Latin, olibanum, derived from Libanus. The leading O may have come from Latin, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so, right? Let's just learn a little bit more about frankincense. The trees start producing resin at about 8 to 10 years old. Tapping is done 2 times per year, with the final taps producing the best tiers because of their higher aromatic, blah, 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 blah. Generally speaking, the more opaque resins are the best quality. Cheap resin is produced in the Horn of Africa. Okay, so we get the idea. So here's the tree that it comes from. So just like you tap a maple out of a maple tree, right? You tap into the maple tree and sap out of there, which is the maple syrup. So that's what's happening with this tree. Okay, this Boswellia sacra tree, and the resin, the sap is being extracted, and then it's being dried, and that's frankincense. Okay. All right. So we got that. Let's go on. I see everyone has disappeared because we're talking about very technical stuff. Hello, Paul. How are you? Welcome. Okay, so let's go on. And end soon, by the way, Paul. So you've come towards the end of the study, but that's okay. So now we see this is how you bring a grain offering. Okay, fine flour, meaning high quality flour. It's olive oil is poured upon it. and then frankincense is placed upon that. So it's flour, oil, and frankincense. Okay, verse 2. והביאה אל בני אהרון, הכהנים וחמץ משם מלוא קומצו, מסלתה ומשמנה על כל לבונתה, והקטיר הכהן את אז קרתה המזבחה, אישר ריח ניחוח ליהוה. So this is also a firing offering because it's on the altar. Okay, so הביאה אל בני אהרון הכהנים. So he brings it to the person who wants to bring this grain offering, brings it to the sons of Aaron, who are the priests. וקמץ משם מלא קומצו, and he basically takes a handful of it, okay? And let me just see something for myself here. Okay. So it looks like a single handful. So he puts his hand in there, grabs a handful of it. Okay. Misalta from the basket. Mishmana, and also from the oil. So I guess the oil is poured on top of the we said the oil is poured on top of the flour. So that makes like kind of like a sticky dough, right? The oil and the flour mixed together. So now that and that's placed in a basket, the Kohen is now taking a handful of that on hand, and also taking all of the frankincense, Vayikra Kohen et askarata hamizbecha. And so the Kohen is now burning, now making it go up in smoke, a et askarata, meaning literally askarata means like a memorial portion. I think they usually translate it as a memorial of it, and I'll explain what that means in a second. On the altar or on the slaughter site, and it's a fire offering, a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. So what's going on here? So imagine you come with a basket full of high quality flour, you've poured oil on it, the oil now soaks into the flour, and then you've placed frankincense on top of it, which is this resin that we saw. Where was it? No, that's a chicken. That's not frankincense. Frankincense, this resin, okay? You place it on top of it. I don't know if it was ground up. I assume maybe it was ground up. And then you bring it to the Kohen. The Kohen reaches his hand into the basket, grabs a handful of the stuff, including all of the frankincense, and then throws it onto the altar. And it goes up in smoke on top of the altar. And this is now a fire offering, which is a pleasant scent to Yahweh. Notice here that as opposed to chapter 1, where we saw the Holocaust or the holy burnt or the Olah offering, where everything is thrown onto the altar, not everything is thrown onto the altar here. Just a handful is thrown onto the altar. A handful of that flour and oil is thrown onto the altar. All of the frankincense is thrown on the altar, but only a handful of the flour with its oil, and that's why it's called an azkarata, a memorial portion. Okay. In other words, one portion of it is thrown as a kind of memorial of the whole thing, or kind of, what would be a better word? It's to remind God of the whole thing that has been brought, but only a portion, only a handful of it is thrown onto the altar. Okay. And what happens to the rest? We hear in verse 3. We see here in verse 3. ונותרת מן המנחה לאהרון ולבניו קודש קדושים מאישי Yahweh. And the rest goes to Aaron and his sons. This is part of their payment for their service in the temple, in the tabernacle, in the tent of meeting, we should say, maybe to generalize it. And Livanav, Kodesh Kodashim, it's holy of holies. Whatever that means, it's kind of an ambiguous phrase, but we'll talk about it more as we go through Leviticus. Meishe Yahweh. So among the fire offerings of Yahweh, this is considered holy of holies. So this is the first time we see, and we're only in chapter 2, but this is the first time we see a part of an offering that goes to our own sons, that goes to Kohanim. In the case of chapter 1, where we had the fully burnt offerings, everything aside from the blood which always gets at the base of the altar, and aside from the skin, which gets dumped on the ash pile, then everything else went on to the altar. It was a fully burnt offering, a Holocaust offering. Here, this is the first time we see that only part of the offering goes onto the altar, and the only altar we're talking about here is the altar of sacrifice. Even though it's a grain, and even though it has a spice, frankincense, this is not burnt on the incense altar, right? Again, if you look at a map, the incense altar is going to be right here, okay? But it's talking about this altar. So this grain offering, this handful from the grain offering, is thrown onto the altar, which is out in the courtyard, the altar of sacrifice. Okay, let's move on. Verse 4, and we'll try to get through Leviticus 2, and then we're going to stop. This is a long study. And do I have that logged? I believe so. I have up to Leviticus 2:6 logged. I don't know if I have the straight log anymore right now, but we'll see. Verse 4, V'chi takriv korban mincha ma'afeh tanur solet chalot matzot blulot bashamen u'rekikei matzot mishuchim bashamen. Okay, so here we have just flour. You want to just bring a basket full of flour, okay? Then this is the way you do it. You douse it in oil, in olive oil. The oil soaks in. You put frankincense on top. The Kohen takes a handful, throws it on the altar, and everybody is happy. Okay, verse 4. But now we're talking about bringing a basket of flour. Okay, we're talking about korban mincha ma'afeh tanur. Okay, a baked good. You want to bring baked goods, literally ma'afeh tanur, that which is baked, or something ma'afeh, a baked good, or a good that is baked in an oven. Might be a good way to translate the whole thing there. Okay. Solet halot matzot blulot b'shemen urikike matzot mishuchim bashamen. So we have two possibilities. The first one is solet. I'm sorry. It should really be solet. That stops it. Always, it's made out of fine flour. Okay. And solet. Let me just see something here. See how every fox deals with that one. So that's 4. Yeah, right. So he's applying flour to both of them, right? Okay. I agree with that. So tanur solet. So it's to be made out of fine flour. Okay. So baked goods are to be made. If you're going to bring baked goods, they're to be made out of fine flour. And again, fine flour meaning high quality flour. And maybe we'll use Everett Fox's translation, which is where did Everett Fox go? So there it just translates it as flour, but here it translates it as proper flour. I just like high quality flour or top quality flour. We'll just say high quality flour. Okay. So there are two choices if you want to bring baked goods. Chalot, matzot blulot bashemen. So it's going to be chalot is like well, you know what a challah is, right? So it's like loaves, or here they translate as cakes. We'll go with cakes. So cakes of matzah. And we know what matzot, so we know what that is, unleavened bread. So cakes of unleavened bread, blulot bashamen, that are mixed with oil. Okay. And so since this is blulot, I think what this means, mixed with oil, this means you take flour, you mix it with the oil, and then you bake it into matzot. Then you bake it into unleavened bread. Okay. I do a fair amount of baking, and I'm sure other people out there do. So you know that obviously, if you don't add any leavening agent, it's not going to rise. Even if you add oil to the flour, okay, it's going to form like a dough. Okay, and then you add, I guess, the water as needed. Water is not mentioned explicitly, but it's implied. And then these are baked into cakes. These are baked into loaves. Cakes, I think, would be a better translation. So that's one possibility. Rikike matzot. These are basically matzah crackers. Okay. And then mishuchim bashamen, they're dipped, or here they translate as anointed, I guess, which would be technically correct, anointed with oil. Okay, so the other possibility is you make these kind of matzah crackers, that don't have oil in them. It's just flour and water, and that's gonna turn into crackers. Okay, they're very dry, tasteless crackers, like the kind that the rabbis make on Passover. Mishuchim b'shemen, and then they are anointed with oil. In other words, olive oil is poured over them. Okay, so those are the two possibilities. Let's see if there's any commentary we can get on that. Okay, so this is Robert Alter. When you bring it forward a grain offering, baked in an oven, it is to be fine semolina. Okay, so high quality semolina, flatbread cakes mixed in oil, or wafers of flatbread coated with oil. Okay. All right. Ve'im incha ala machvat. Okay, so this is if you bake it in. This is a grain offering that you bake, so you can make either loaves or you can make crackers. Another possibility is not to bake it in an oven, but you fry it in a pan. Okay, machvat is a frying pan. Even in modern Hebrew, a machvat is a frying pan. Okay. Mincha al machvat korbanecha. If that's going to be your offering, then solet blula bashamen matzah tiyeh. Then it has to be flour that's mixed with oil, with olive oil, and then fried into matzot. So basically, what we're talking about here is kind of like a tortilla. Okay, maybe a little bit thicker than that, but if you take, how are tortillas made? Not corn tortillas, but I'm talking about flour tortillas. You take flour. I mean, the most basic type would be you take flour, you mix some oil and a little bit of water into it, and you make a dough. You flatten it out. You put it on a frying pan, and out comes a tortilla. So this is kind of like a tortilla it's talking about, right? It's flour mixed with oil and water, is understood, and then it's rolled out, and maybe not as thin as a tortilla, and then it's fried in a frying pan. Okay. 6. So once you make this tortilla, we'll call it patotot tapitim v'tzakta aleh shaman minchahu. So then you're going to break it up into pieces. And patot probably comes from the underlying word bread, like a pita. So I think let's just see how they deal with it here. Got crumble. I'm sure they're going to say the root is pita. It only appears once in all of Leviticus. I mean, in all of the Tanakh. Crumble. 1 second here. This is nitcha pitim, nitcha pat, lechem, pat. Yeah. Piece. Just 1 second. Okay, pat lechem. Right. So it doesn't mean a piece, but it's often used. Pitavi tzakta, pitim vitikri, pitim pat lechem, tech. So it means a piece of bread, basically. It's always used with bread, this word pitim. Pat lechem, pat. Maybe not in Job. And I think it always does. I'm not going to look into the whole thing right now. But basically, so it means a piece of bread, right? So patatot pitim. So you break this bread up into pieces, or you should break it up into pieces of bread. And then v'yitzakta aleh shaman. So you take this tortilla that you've made, this kind of thick tortilla, you break it up into pieces of bread. That's where, by the way, we get the word pita. You've heard of pita bread, but pita really comes from the word pat, which means a piece of bread. And again, this word pot seems to always be associated, even though it's usually translated as piece, seems to always be associated with bread. In other words, a piece of bread. And you shall pour upon it oil, and it is the grain offering. So that's how you want to do it. So we have 3 possibilities here so far. Okay. One is baking it. No, bringing a flour, a basket of flour. Okay. The second one is baking it. And then the third one is frying it in a frying pan. Okay. And now we come to a fourth possibility, machreshet. I'm sorry, marcheshet. So marcheshet, they translate here as covered pan. Let's see how Everett Fox does that one. 7. So he translates that as a frying pan. And here he says a griddle. Okay. This one translates as griddle and frying pan. I don't know what the difference is between a griddle and a frying pan, except that a frying pan is deeper than a griddle. Robert Alter translates the first one as griddle and then pan. Okay, fine. Let's go with that. Griddle and pan. So now we have another type of pan. I guess a deeper pan, right? Mar cheshet. And what would be the underlying root for mar cheshet? Let's see. Rochesh, got it. Stew pan or saucepan. Okay, so all the translations seem to be implying that it's like a deeper pan, right? That the first one is kind of just a griddle, a pan with no walls, and this is a deeper pan. Okay. The NIV translated as a covered pan. So rochesh in modern Hebrew, and I guess in ancient Hebrew as well, I'd have to check, means to stir. So they call it here a stew pan or saucepan. Okay. From rachash, a stew pan. See Hebrew rachash. Just look at this for a second. All right. To keep moving to stir. That'll actually be my heart was stirred. Okay. Boom. So we get the idea. So it's another type of frying pan, apparently with deeper walls. First one didn't. So korbaneh solet b'shamen ta'aseh. So it's going to be fine flour, high quality flour, mixed with oil. It doesn't say literally mixed, blula, but I think that's the implication here. Verse 8, Vayikra et mincha asher ye'aseh me'ela leYahweh v'yikriva el hakohen v'yigisha el hamizbeach. So in case of one second. Right. Okay, so this is now talking about these three types. So verse 8 says, now what do you do with these three types? So you have the things that were baked in the oven, things that were baked on a griddle, and things that were baked in a frying pan. Verse 8 says, and you bring the grain offering, the gift that was made for these to Yahweh, el kohen, and el kohen, you shall bring it, you shall hand it over or cause it to come close, present it to the kohen might be the best translation. V'yigisha el mizbeach, and then he shall place it, meaning the kohen shall place it on the altar, on the slaughter site. Okay, verse 9. Ve'erim hakohen min hamincha el askarata. I'm sorry, he won't place it on the slaughter site. He'll bring it before the slaughter site. And he then takes a memorial piece of it. He takes a portion of it, and then he takes that memorial portion, that symbolic portion of it, okay, and it's burnt or it's put up into smoke on top of the altar. And it's a fire offering, a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Okay. Verse 10. And the same thing here, just as it was with the basket of flour, the leftover, hanoteret, is given to Aaron and his sons, meaning given to the Kohanim. And Kodesh Kodeshim, Holy of Holies, which whatever that means, and we'll talk about that maybe in another time. Me'ishe Yahweh. It's holy of holies among the fire offerings of Yahweh. So there were 4 types of grain offering that were being spoken of here. First is just a basket of flour. The second is that which is baked in an oven. The third is that which is baked on a griddle. And then the fourth is that which is baked in a frying pan. Okay, in all cases, it's brought to the Kohen. The Kohen brings it over the altar, takes a memorial piece of it, takes a portion of it as a memorial, as the actual portion of the sacrifice to represent the entire gift that was given, throws it on the altar, burns it on the altar, and then the rest is given to the Kohanim as their gift, their salary, essentially. Okay, verse 11. כל המנחה אשר תקריבו ליהוה לא תעשה חמץ, כי כל שאור וכל דבש לא תקטירו ממנה אישה ליהוה. This is very interesting and very important. I wish we had more time, but I'm going to end the study in a couple of minutes. This is very relevant to Passover. So כל מנחה אשר תקריבו ליהוה, so every grain offering that you shall present to Yahweh, you offer to Yahweh, every gift of grain that you shall offer to Yahweh, lo te'aseh hametz, should not be made of leavened bread. Should not be made of leavened bread. He calls se'or, v'kol dvash lo taktiru menu ishet liYahweh, because no leavening agent, no yeast, I'll talk about what these mean in a second, and no honey, he calls se'or v'kol dvash, or any yeast and any honey, lo taktiru mimena ishet liYahweh. You shall not burn as a sacrifice, as part of a sacrifice to Yahweh. Okay, so the commandment here is that all grain offerings that are brought, they shall never be chametz, they shall never be leavened bread. Okay, and then we have an insight into more insight than we usually get, or parallel insight into what leavened bread is, as when it speaks about Passover. Okay, so leavened bread should not be brought as a grain offering, because, or maybe not because, I think because is the wrong translation. Okay, or as such, and as such, I'll translate it as, okay, no, se'or, what is se'or? It's a leavening agent. In modern days, it would be concentrated yeast that you buy in the store, or baking powder or baking soda. In ancient times, it was one thing and one thing only, and that was what we call a sourdough starter. And the word sour comes from this word se'or, and I think even surprisingly standard etymologies admit to that, although I'm not 100% sure. I have to check that again. Okay, but se'or is sourdough starter. It's basically concentrated leavening agent, which allows dough to rise mixed in with the dough. Okay, v'chol dvash. Okay, so we got that. So this concentrating leavening agent, this yeast, okay, concentrated yeast, is going to cause the bread to rise and become leavened bread. That's chametz. That's the opposite of matzah. V'chol dvash. And then it says also honey. What does honey have to do with anything? Okay, well, if you add honey to dough, it's not going to cause the dough to rise. Okay, if you just add it by itself. However, if you add honey to dough, which has concentrated leavening agents, then the honey, as anyone who has ever baked any bread knows, the honey, and just like sugar in modern day age, is going to be food. It's going to be like superfood for the yeast. And actually, when it's a se'or here, if you make sourdough starter, it's not just yeast, it's yeasteria. I can't remember. There might be other types of there might be other types of organisms in there that essentially they release carbon dioxide, and that is what allows the bread to rise. The gluten, which is a protein in wheat, catches that carbon dioxide in bubbles, and so the bread expands. Okay, so just as if you've ever made homemade bread in this day and age, you take the yeast, you add it to the flour, and what else do you almost always add? Do you always add basically? Sometimes you add it just to the yeast itself before adding the whole thing to flour, but you're going to add sugar. The sugar provides food for the yeast. These are live organisms. And when I say the yeast, I shouldn't say only the yeast. say all the organisms, because also yeast, it's bacteria. It might be other forms of life as well. Okay, they use the sugar as their food, and there was no sugar in the ancient times. The sugar comes from the New World, right? As far as I remember, I believe that's correct. But there was no sugar that you don't go to the supermarket and buy sugar in ancient times. You used the food they used for the yeast / bacteria was honey. Okay, so the honey is food for the yeast. Okay, and so therefore these were part and parcel of making leavened bread. Okay, concentrated leavening agent / yeast and honey as food for the yeast, for the organisms. Okay. So lo taktiru mimeno ishet liyahweh. So we're going to translate this entire verse. Then it would say, any grain offering which you offer to Yahweh, lo te'aseh chametz, shall not be made as leavened bread, shall not be made out of leavened bread. Ki kol se'or, okay, seeing that, or in so much as no concentrating leavening agent, no yeast, and no honey, which is food for the yeast, shall be burnt, shall be burnt on as a fire offering to Yahweh. Okay, so this gives us very interesting insight as to the way that leavened bread was made in ancient times. It wasn't just concentrated leavening agent, but also apparently honey was added to it as food for that concentrated, for the organisms in that concentrated leavening agent. Okay. Go on to the end of this chapter, and then we're going to stop. Yeah, we'll get to that. We will get to that. Okay, that's a special case. Okay. And let me just see that right now. That's Leviticus 23. So we're talking there about Shavuot. So that was not a fire offering. That was never burnt. That was just presented. Okay, so Leviticus 23:17. Okay, so it's not a fire offering. It's an isha, it's a nufa. Okay, so this actually supports what we're saying here in Leviticus. In Leviticus chapter 2, because this is never thrown onto the altar of sacrifice, onto the how did Everett Fox translate it? Onto the slaughter site. Okay, we'll just call it the altar of sacrifice for now. It's never thrown onto the altar of sacrifice. It's waved. Okay, it's a tnufa. Okay, it's a wave offering. Okay, and that's the Shavuot offering. That's made out of wheat, and that is basically the offering that's brought as the first fruits of the wheat offering. Okay, so there's no contradiction. Itan avior. Okay, these are fire offerings, and it specifically says, okay, he calls or the called devash lo taktiru mimenu ishet Yahweh. Okay, no yeast, no concentrated leavening agent, and no honey shall be burnt as a fire offering, or shall be burnt as part of a fire offering to Yahweh. So specifically, we're talking about chametz not being brought as all offerings, but as a fire offering. Okay, so no leavened bread is to go up onto the altar of sacrifice and be burnt. It's okay, as we saw in Leviticus 23:17. It's okay, or it's not only okay, it's commanded to bring leavened bread, but that is not a fire offering. That's not burnt on the altar of sacrifice. That's waved as a wave offering. Okay, just as the Omer offering is a wave offering, even though that's not baked bread. The Omer offering is sheaves of barley. Okay, let's try to get to the end of chapter 2 here, and then I'm going to stop. Okay, I hope that clears it up. Okay, verse 12. Korban reshit takrivu otam liyahweh el hamizbeach lo ya'alu lereach nichoch. Oh, here we go. Let me just get a translate on this one, just to confirm that what I'm seeing there is what other commentators see. Right. Bingo. This actually answers your question precisely. So apparently, the Torah picks up on that potential contradiction or that potential misunderstanding and clarifies exactly your question here, Eitan Abior, clarifies it in verse 12. Korban reshit tagrivu otam, Yahweh ve'el hamizbeach lo ya'alu lereach nichoach. So korban reshit. What is korban reshit? A first fruits offering. Reshit, like bereshit, right? In the beginning. So korban reshit would be translated as a first fruits offering or as a first grains offering. It's usually just called the first fruits offering. So a first fruits offering, takrivotam, you may present them. Meaning, I think what it's speaking about here is chametz. Okay, I know for a fact what it's speaking about is no. It might actually just two possibilities, but one of the possibilities is that it's saying korban reshit takrivotam. In other words, for a first fruits offering, you may present leavened bread. You may present chametz liyahweh. Okay, but they shall not be put up onto the altar of sacrifice as a sweet smelling scent. Okay, so this is saying here. This is either saying that it's, I won't go through the two possibilities. I'll just go through the more likely one. So this is saying, this is contrasting here. So for first fruit, basically what it's saying is that anything that's going to be, any grain offering that's going to be placed, that's going to be thrown on the altar of sacrifice and burnt, cannot be chametz, it cannot be leavened bread. However, if it's a first fruit, it can be leavened bread because it's not thrown up onto the altar and burnt. Okay, it's just brought, and as we saw in Leviticus 23:17, in waves. Okay, let's go on, verse 13. So verse 12 actually answers your question exactly. And not only does it answer your question exactly, I thank you so much for the question because I never would have really focused on the contrast between this issue here and the issue in Leviticus 23:17. Thank you for bringing that up because it made me realize for the first time going through this that verse 12 actually is focusing on that dichotomy between the sacrifices that you throw on the altar and the ones that you just bring without being thrown on the altar. That those second ones, those latter ones, can be chametz. Okay, and that distinction is drawn in verse 12 explicitly. Verse 13, v'chol korban mintchatcha b'melach timlach v'lo tashbit melach brit Elohecha mi'al mintchatecha. Okay, and so now we have one other piece of information. V'chol korban mintchatcha, and every sacrifice, every grain sacrifice, and that would seem to include also these first fruit sacrifices that are spoken about, that one of which is spoken about in Leviticus 23:17, the Shavuot sacrifice. So b'melach timlach, you shall sprinkle salt on it. Literally, you shall salt. You know that even works in English. Salt it with salt. V'lo tashbit melach brit Elohecha mi'al mintchatecha, and you shall not hold back. You should not omit salt brit Elohecha from the covenant of your God. Mi'al mintchatecha. Okay, from your grain offering. And so with every one of your offerings, implying again the grain offerings, takriv melach, you shall also present, or it shall also have salt on it. It shall also be have salt placed on it. Okay. We'll talk about what this means here. Velo tashbit melach brit Elohecha, salt, which is the covenant of your God. Let's get a little comment on that. And I really got to end here. So raw altar, okay. Salt of the covenant of your God from your grain offering. Let's see if he has something to say about that. Okay. The indispensable presence of salt may ultimately derive from the fact that the sacrifices were originally imagined as a divine meal. That's precisely what I was going to mention. And that seasoning with salt was felt to be necessary in order to make the food palatable. Okay? Compare Job 6:6 as tasteless food eaten unsalted. But throughout the Mediterranean, salt was associated with covenants. And the phrase in Numbers 18:19, a perpetual covenant of salt, suggests that the link between salt and permanently binding covenants may have been reinforced by salt's efficacy as a preservative. Okay? So I would go into that a little bit more, but we don't have time now. So Numbers 18:19 talks about a perpetual covenant of salt. Robert Alter says that's because salt acts as a preservative. I think another alternative explanation is because salt, lasts forever. It's I wouldn't say lasts forever, but it's, it's something that you can leave salt on your shelf for years, and as long as it doesn't get wet, then it's going to stay in basically the same condition as when you got it. It doesn't degrade even after long periods of time. So that represents the covenant between Yahweh and his people Israel, Numbers 18:19, perpetual covenant of salt. And then the other thing I was going to mention, Robert Alter mentions it exactly here, is that this is food, right? This is not literally, because God is not literally eating, but obviously, right? He doesn't have a body, okay? But it's figuratively speaking or symbolically speaking, this is food for Yahweh. We bring in the best of the grains. We bring him the best of the herds, the best of the flocks. We chop it up for him. We throw it on the altar, and it even says it makes a sweet smelling scent for Yahweh. Okay, all of the stuff that's thrown on the altar. Okay, so if you're giving God, symbolically speaking, again, not really speaking, because this is all symbolic. God doesn't have a body, he doesn't have a mouth, he doesn't eat. But if you're symbolically speaking, giving God an offering, then it better be salted, right? It has to be seasoned so that it tastes good, because food without salt is not good. Okay, and actually, wherever I go, I always have salt with me. Believe it or not, I always have salt in my bag, and because a lot of times in restaurants or wherever you're eating, they either don't have salt available at the table, or they have very poor quality salt. So I always have good Himalaya salt with me wherever I go, and I always put a lot of salt on my food. Okay, let's go to the end of chapter 2, and then we'll end. Ve'im takrib minchat bikurim Yahweh aviv kalui. Oh God, so much to say here. Aviv kalui ba'esh. Geres Carmel, Takriv et Mincha Bikurecha. So if you're going to bring a first fruits offering to Yahweh, then it has to be Aviv Kalui. Oh boy, I wish we had another hour to talk about this. Aviv, as Karaites, we know what Aviv is. It's almost ripe barley, and this is roasted Aviv. So this is one of the proofs that Aviv has to be at least at a stage of ripeness where you can take the seed and roast it, and it won't just dissipate because at earlier stages is so much water content that it basically dissipates in the fire. Okay, so Aviv Kalui Be'esh, so almost ripe barley. I'll translate it as roasted in fire, or Geres Carmel. So Geres Gurisim in modern Hebrew would be like porridge. So basically like pounded grains, pounded ripe grains. Okay. So basically we're talking about porridge in a certain sense. You take the ripe grains and then you just basically pound them until they turn into kind of a porridge. Okay. Here they translate as beaten ripe grains. So that's what you bring for your first grain offerings. If you don't want to bring a loaf of bread, if you just want to bring the actual grains, you can either parch them. Okay, you can parch the almost ripe grains in fire, or you can take the fully ripe grains and then you could beat them into a porridge. Okay. Verse 15, Venatata aleha shemen, samta alea livona minchahi, and then on top of that you add oil and frankincense. Verse 16, Viktira kohen et askarata mi yirah umi shmana an kol levonata ishe le Yahweh. Okay. And then the Kohen takes a portion of that porridge and its oil. I think I guess I think this from here to here is talking about just the porridge. Okay, so takes a portion of the porridge with its oil and with all of the livonah, and then it's thrown on the altar and burnt as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Okay, that brings us to the end of Leviticus chapter 2. Okay, I know it's very technical, but I think it's also been extremely logical, right? We've seen in chapter 1, we spoke about fire offerings. I'm sorry, I should say burnt offerings, or as we call them, fully burnt offerings, whole burnt offerings, Holocaust, or everything goes up in flames offerings. Okay, and we saw here the types of animals that are allowed to be brought. Okay, it's either the herd animals or the flock animals. Then we had the laws for the herd animals. Okay, and I should say animals, I should say mammals. Then we had the laws for the herd animals. We had the laws for the flock animals. And then we go on to the other type of meat, okay, which is the birds. So there were two types of birds, either the turtle dove or the pigeon, okay? And then we have the laws for bringing those as fully burnt, as holy burnt offerings, okay? So that takes care of the meat. We don't throw fish on the altar, right? No lox and bagels thrown on the altar or anything like that. It's just either mammals or birds, okay? It's never a case where you see fish being thrown on the altar. Why? I think fish are too, first of all, they smell, right? And second of all, they're just probably considered too low a life form. Like you're not going to throw reptiles on there. You're not going to throw insects on there, okay? It was just considered too lowly a form of life to be a sacrifice to God. That's my understanding. Okay, and then we have the grain offerings. Okay, so we have all the rules for the grain offerings. It's mixed with oil, it's mixed with frankincense. We explored a bit what frankincense is. And then we have the different types of grain offerings. Okay, whether it was cooked in the oven, made on a, I'm sorry, whether it was first taken in a, where is it, salah, Sata is a basket full of flour, or whether it was baked in an oven, made on a griddle, made on a frying pan. And then we saw that none of those things that are thrown on the altar could be made out of chametz. However, the first fruit offerings, which are not thrown on the altar, can be made out of chametz and are made out of chametz. And then we had, if you don't want to bring as the first fruit offerings, or if it's not called for the first fruit offerings, to bake loaves of bread, to bake bread, then in that case, you have the possibility of taking the grains, and we saw that could either be aviv, roasted aviv, or it could be ripe grains that are pounded into a porridge. And that's it. So that completes so chapter 1 is the holy burnt offerings, the burnt offerings. Chapter 2 is the grain offerings. I wish we had more time to go into the rest, but that's going to have to be enough for today. Then we have the shlamim, the peace offerings in chapter 3. Chapter 4, the chatat, the sin offerings or the purification from sin offerings. That's a bit complicated and detailed. And then in chapter 5, we have, as this implies here, the sins requiring a sin offering. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get into all of that. I wish we could study for 3 or 4 hours every single day and go into all of these in detail because they are absolutely fascinating. But we're going to end it here. It's been almost 4 hours that we've been going at it. I didn't even take a break this time, so I'm tired. And we'll end it here. I thank you all for joining me for this talk. This has been the World Alliance of Qara'im. Yes, you're welcome, Paul. This has been the World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat Torah study. And let's get that up. And I thank you for joining me. Please like, subscribe, spread the word about these studies. Really, the time is ripe. I think people really want to come back to True Torah now, and it would be great if more and more people could start joining these studies. So please subscribe, like, share. Do all those nice things that the various algorithms on Facebook and Twitter and X, formerly known as Twitter, and YouTube use to get the word out. And other than that, What else can I say? I guess we'll see you again next week. Check out my newspaper, which I've been publishing since 1997, but since 2023, it was kind of on ice for many years, but I've really tried to bring it back to life. That's Your Jerusalem. So it's www.yourjerusalem.org. Okay, I used to publish this in the late 90s in Jerusalem. We would distribute about 20,000 issues per copy all around Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. So check that out. Your Jerusalem, www.yourjerusalem.org, and please spread the word about the newspaper as well. And with that, I'm going to end it. We'll go out as we usually do with a little bit of music. I thank you all for joining us here, for joining me here with the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study. And as I mentioned, we're going to do a Torah study on it looks like on Monday, a Purim Torah study, the book of Esther. And I will send out details about that probably tomorrow. And that's it. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you again, B'ezrat Yahweh, next week. We'll go out with some music as always. So just give me a second to set that up.
עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל יקום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור. את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם.